Good morning, everybody. And here we are going to start off with day 2, where we continue on our story that we started yesterday, both about being the two sides of the world. So I'm just going to get started with this. Thank you with that. Okay, great. So we're going to look at the Eastern Tigers this time round, because of course there's been quite a lot of speculation as to whether or not this is going to be the Asian century. So that's something that we've seen for a long time, that there's always been this idea that, okay, I mean, I suppose if the Western world is going to sort of fall from grace, we've had the British be in charge for a very long time. We've had the Americans be in charge for a very long time. Is it time now for China or even any other of these Asian countries to sort of take its place as the new superpower? And if you look at quite a lot of the thinkers of our generation who have been speculating for the longest time, and I guess that conversation has kind of shifted a little bit in the last 1 year or so, but definitely before the pandemic, I'm sure everyone remembers that we've been talking about this idea of perhaps the changing global superpower, and that's something that we're going to be paying a lot of attention to today. So here's the big question that we're going to address. Can Asia be our saving grace? So as I said, at least before the pandemic, yesterday I shared a slide that said the World Bank had thought that, or the World Economic Forum had thought that it was going to be the Asian century. And in fact, this article was taken from just when China had been reopening around the time of right after the pandemic. So it says here that Asia is set to lead the world economic growth pushed by China's reopening after the pandemic. And of course, we're going to have to include people like Japan, South Korea in that conversation as well. However, what we also see now, this was just from maybe about a month ago. Today is the 5th of November, right? So this is just about a month ago, where the World Bank seems to have changed its tune a little bit. But I don't know about you, but the World Bank tends to be a little bit kind of inconsistent with, every year the story is different. And just as bank forecasts tend to be different every single year, there's not much consistency there. But you see that suddenly now they changed their mind and said that Asia faces a worse outlook in 50 years. And apparently even the Financial Times is kind of agreeing with that as well. So, of course, today I'm going to be focusing a lot on 3 hotspots in the Eastern world. So I'm very fair here. We did 3 in the Western world. So we're going to do 3 in the Eastern world. I'm going to jump right into it. And we're going to start off first with South Korea. And it has a category all by itself. So that's so South Korea, the land of Psy and Gangnam Style. So the first thing that I'm going to bring up here is that not sure if how much people have been following in terms of Korean news, but things haven't been going as well for the young people. We all know about Chinese unemployment, but you find that similar situations are also happening in South Korea at the moment. So in terms of the dates that I've given here, it begins from as early as 2022. So, I mean, obviously, this is not going to, it's not like a recent thing. The economy has been affecting South Korea for a period of time now. Now, however, what we see here is that this is going to last. It's a period that sort of seems to end around March in about 4 months' time, 5 months' time. So what I see here is that there could be a bit of an unexpected situation in the economy that produces a sudden surge in unemployment. So what I'm referring to in the chart here. So I'll explain a few things, okay? Now, the 6th house is very important in a country's chart because it, among other things, it describes a few things. One of it is health, and it's one of the things that led me to sort of surmise that we could potentially have a bit of a health crisis that was showing up in 2020. So that was from my previous webinars before the pandemic. But in the 6th house, we also look at things like employment. So in terms of like the labor force, whether or not people are getting jobs, whether things are getting done in the economy. So South Korea actually has this green symbol that's here. And this is Chiron. And usually in a country's chart, Chiron sort of determines where things can be a bit painful. So painful can be anything from basically like a pandemic to basically unemployment or certain industries, specifically industries not doing well. And this would be very pertinent if, say, there are specific industries that are very important to specific countries, let's just say. So what we have here is, first of all, that we have Chiron here, and that Uranus. Now, I mentioned quite a bit about this blue color planet yesterday, that where I find Uranus sort of like doing things in a chart is where we expect to see a little bit of chaos that shows up. And when it shows up in the 12th house, and the 12th seems to be a place in the astrology chart that describes where things are, it's an unexpected or unseen problem. And this is one reason why I said that there could be an unexpected situation in the economy. So this could include anything from young people deciding not to have jobs instead. So I suppose the Great Resignation is not a phenomenon that is only happening in the Western world. It's probably also showing up in the Eastern world as well. And what I also see here is that we've got Neptune. So this is the thing that looks a bit like a trident. And when it's up here in the 11th house, now the 11 deals with things like the community, how people are feeling, how people are experiencing things. And as we have Neptune there, sometimes it refers to people feeling kind of lost. And the indications here show it's not the entire population that's feeling lost, but it's actually quite specific to the youth or the young people. And in fact, and it looks like resignation. And the word resignation can mean two fronts, right? One is that they're actually literally resigning their jobs. And the second is that they are sort of feeling a little bit sad, right? Or they're just not feeling very hopeful about jobs. And in fact, what I also want to point out here is, let's get my cursor here, that it's forming this sort of like a 90-degree portion, and it's pointing to the second house where it's dealing with things like income and money. So it does look like some ways in which this can play out is like potentially, like I said, people leaving their jobs in droves, or potentially just sort of like waves that occur in specific industries where suddenly we may see movements in terms of whether people were earning suddenly a lot, or in this case, it could be that people are suddenly earning very little, is also a possibility here. Now, I also suggest here that it can also have a lot of effects on young people who are in school. So this can refer to sort of like little kids, right? Or whether or not, and South Korea, this is a bit unique to South Korea because, and also I suppose in places like China, where education is such a big part of their culture. And anybody who knows anything about South Korea knows that it's a bit of a cramped culture when it comes to kids. And I suppose if it becomes a very big issue where the older kids who are graduating from school are facing these issues, then, and of course, these people are also the millennials who have school-going children around now. And it can actually sort of show a changing attitude when it comes to exams and school-going children. So it's interesting that it's actually happening around now. So and in fact, the strong period seems to be November, which is around now, all the way until the first quarter of next year. So I can't pretend to be super familiar with the school semester structure in South Korea, but we could see patterns like people deciding not to enroll in specific types of schools. We should be seeing sort of like early indications of sometimes even culture, especially the young people. And in this case, young people can also refer to like young parents who are still considered like the millennial young people sort of generation. And I took this off the Straits Times, and this is a very recent article that was featured. And it says here that 1.26 million South Korean young people are on record as being unemployed. So these are the people that are being traced. We're not even talking about the people who are like not on the record, And out of this group, more than half are college degree holders. Okay, so that's something is an actual statistic that's in the papers already. So moving a little bit further down into the year, and there are even further indications of Korean culture shifting. And this is coming up from about May to April of next year. So that's going to last for almost the entire of a year. And so first of all, it will probably manifest in society as being a specific pessimism about specifically the education system. And I think it's hitting South Korea so hard because of that naturally, I suppose if you are from the generation that's been told that you should give up a lot of your fun activities, not be like a fun kid, give up music, give up dating, give up fashion, because you need to spend 14 hours studying for an exam. And that is South Korean culture. And also with regard to things like student debt. And of course, we find things like finding partners become a really big issue in South Korea. There is a very good reason why the reproductive rates are among the lowest in South Korea. So it does look like and of course, some people may be thinking, but maybe this isn't new. I mean, South Korea has been grappling with this for like, I don't know, like a really, really long time. But when it does show up in a chart, does not mean that the people start to change their minds. The reality is, I think they started to change their minds for a number of years now. But what the chart suggests is that the debates are going to start ensuing. So you should start seeing indications possibly in the media. You start to see like politicians, or especially young politicians, starting to call for specific changes. Sometimes in policy, you get young people forming themselves into committees to try to push for change. That's what I'm talking about. And I think this is the part that's going to be newer in our society. Okay, so then another thing is that of course, if things don't move quickly enough, and I think also it's quite unrealistic to expect that the moment you start complaining that that rules change, we all know that it doesn't quite sort of play out that way. So sometimes it plays out as a bit of a disillusionment with the government, and also furthermore antagonism towards jobs and income and debt. So it's like there isn't just one or two indications that is suggesting to me that that employment is going to get affected. So it's not just about the fact that there aren't actual jobs available. I think it's more like people are actually choosing not to get involved right now. So then we should see a massive wave, and what I'm anticipating here is a massive sea change in Korean culture. And it's very specific here, this 1 year period, where what we should be expecting is a departure from a lot of the traditional culture, and especially with regard to specifically education and what childhood means. And I can imagine that, I suppose, if you are around my age, I mean, if you are in your late 30s and most of the kids are in school, a lot of these people grew up with not necessarily having much of a childhood. You know, it's cram culture is a real big thing in Korea. So that's why. And this also means that there are indications that there are radical exploration of money and values. And I'm going to pause here and expand a little bit on this, right? So first of all, the values part is pretty clear. I think I've sort of read. But maybe radical exploration of money. Because I suppose if people are a lot less interested in this idea of an earned income, and in my research, so I'm pushing things a little bit here, but it does look like, because the situation is quite dire in places like South Korea and in places like China, which I'll cover a little bit more on, that a changing attitude towards money also means that in terms of when we look into the air era, that there are quite a lot of avenues where people are really exploring different ways of valuing things. And that means that if there's going to be experimentation about how monetary systems work, or whether is this a workable, is this a sustainability, is another word that will come out a lot. I suspect that we are going to start seeing a whole generation of people in South Korea, very, very well educated people, very cosmopolitan, might actually be starting to look for a different solution to their problems. So of course, I mean, people are going to want me to be more specific, and honestly, the chart doesn't tell me what it is, and all I can give is a bit more of an intelligent guesses that groups are going to start to seriously consider things like universal basic income, different ways of looking at things like wage structures, how people are going to be paid. And I think for the rest of us in who are listening, who may not be centered in South Korea, you may not be doing anything specific with South Korea right now, you may actually be quite interested in paying attention to what actually gets developed in South Korea around this time. because actually it might actually give us a bit of a clue, because right now we are not just experimenting with things, we are squarely in the air era right now. So people are actively looking for an air era solution to a lot of these issues here. So I found this picture when I was doing my research, and I thought this was really quite interesting. So this was actually a demonstration that occurred on the streets in Seoul by a bunch of very young people. And what they did was they simply just lay on the ground, right? And then they had this earth thing going down. So it was a campaign on multiple things. So on one level, it's things like climate change and trying to get like big companies to relook the way in which they do business, or the way in which we look at society. But I thought that looking at a picture like this, you start to get a good sense that the young people, this new generation in South Korea, is potentially, at least in Asia, I mean, I've been Asian all my life, and it's like there are not a lot of places in Asia where people are vocal enough to actually fight in such a visual and such an arresting manner. And I actually found this when I was doing a lot of research about a new phrase that's coming up in Korea. Maybe some of you know it better than I do, because it's actually quite new to me. That there's a phrase where young people describe Korea now as Hell Joseon. And it really means, in English, hell, meaning like it's a place on hell, and Joseon being that their old dynasty, which I thought was very interesting, because yesterday I talked about how the Goryeo industry, the Joseon industry dynasty in South Korea, had been one of the earlier things that had been the way things were in Korea during their golden age. So I thought it was very interesting that a lot of these air era references keep showing up again and again in media, and things that we've forgotten about for a long time just keep showing up in this air era. So so it's very interesting to sort of look at that. And I think for the rest of us who are not Korea, we really should be paying attention to what comes up here, because it's a whole generation that's looking at a new way of looking at money. Okay, so very, very important. So there are two time periods that I want to draw attention to. And it's hard for me to exactly tell you what specifically will happen in these periods. But the first thing I will mention is that I would suggest that the first period, which is in the middle of the year, would probably be more centered on it's a bit sadder. So you're going to get people maybe resigning, maybe there are more complaints, more debates that are talking about the way Korean culture and values are being negotiated. And I think it's only towards the first quarter of next year, as you can see in the second yellow section, where from February to April of next year, that's where you can expect to see a little bit more of the radical solutions that are coming up. Okay, so that's the first hotspot. Now, the second hotspot is where Singapore and Malaysia are. And well, I call it a hotspot because I'm socially obligated to cover Singapore, so it's like I'm based here, and I know that's where most people want to look at. So when I say hotspot, I don't always mean that like bad things are going to happen. Okay, so this one is a bit of a social obligation, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to deal directly with Singapore first, okay? And so the first thing I want to mention is that Singapore is there are a few things that are constantly a concern with Singapore. And the situation is a little bit different from other countries. I mean, in general, I'm Singaporean, and it's not like you're walking on the streets and there's like people panicking, and that's not happening here in Singapore. So there are a few things that is interesting, because the more I study what's happening in the world, there are lots of patterns that are happening all over the place in the world that are not showing up itself in Singapore. So just the fact that Singapore is such an exception, especially in terms of, even as I study into what's happening astrologically, I thought was quite interesting. Like, I had no trouble finding problems in just about every one of the 70 countries I studied for this webinar. I had a bit of trouble coming up with stuff to say for Singapore, if I'm being honest with you guys. But here's what I can show you about what's coming up in 2024 and 2025, that I call it an underlying employment and income concerns. This is very different from what I see in South Korea. So I'm not going to commit to saying that everyone's going to lose their jobs and that there's going to be mass retrenchments. Don't see it. I just don't. Right. So I will look into the astrological elements and just explain maybe a few things that I think you'll be interested in. So just like South Korea, the lines seem to run between the 6th and the 12th house. So this is the part that is similar to the employment concerns in South Korea. Now, however, what it does look like is that what you see is this brown planet here, and this is the planet Saturn. So as it's crossing into the 6th house here, so again, what are some of the potential stresses? Now, Saturn is not always like a happy planet in the sense that it comes with stress, it comes with things slowing down, it comes with things being heavy. So if we were to look at things like a health situation, now I know a lot of people are going to go like, oh my God, is COVID coming back? I'm not going to go that far. This could potentially, and this isn't like one of those scary out of the blue sort of things. It doesn't, because Saturn doesn't deliver lightning strikes. So it doesn't. It's a heavy thing. So it's much more likely to be things that are chronic. So it's like issues that just get heavier and heavier. So it could be old issues that surface again. So could it be things like your usual dengue and your usual like mosquito concerns? Maybe, but is it going to be big enough to actually concern people? Probably not. I would say things like the healthcare system might be something that gets very, very heavy. So what might constitute as heavy could be things like labor shortages. And I don't think that surprises anybody. So you get people leaving the industry and basically not having enough resources. So that would be heavy. You could have, for example, in healthcare, it's not just about people being sick, but you also get maybe an aging society. So that perhaps the lack of resources, people getting concerned about those things, probably. So that makes a lot more sense in a Singapore context. Now, if I were to interpret this in a labor market sort of situation, then the heaviness could be things like pessimism when it comes to rumors about retrenchment. You could see things like maybe collapsing departments, getting people to take on more work for like potentially a bit of a less salary, especially as I said from yesterday, we're not reporting very great economic patterns coming from the West. So is that going to affect Singapore on economic level? Probably. So the thing is, could there be the usual things like having to sort of like, could there be small things like pay cuts or like certain departments? It's stuff, but it's not going to come as a tsunami surprise. That's basically what I see here. Now, another thing that we see here is that sometimes with Saturn, it's when the pessimism sets in, sometimes it's not so much about whether or not people are looking for like a bright, shining opportunity, because that's not what I see from the charts, that the mood is pessimistic but not dire, all right? So in a way, one of the things that I have I'm sort of looking at here is that it's a much more mature approach towards work. That if people are going to be heavy, is also because that's why I wrote here that there would be an emphasis on what I think are meaningful jobs, because people are starting to be a little bit more concerned about, I mean, if you're not going to make a lot of money like either way, so then at least you want to make sure that your time, your effort is being channeled into something that you could at least say was delivering a positive outcome. Now, the sign that is very emphasized here in blue here is actually the sign of Pisces. And Pisces is not a sign that is associated with massive wealth or like people trying to be multi-millionaires. But I think Pisces is very associated with things like compassion or looking at more human factors. So not sure about you, but I like to interpret this in a much more positive way, in the sense that I like to think of it as maturity, that people are starting to pay much more attention to emotional factors, to whether or not there is suffering or difficulties in certain areas, and that people are much more interested in trying to find longer term solutions rather than a get rich quick sort of solution. And I think that's a very positive thing. So there is less on the pursuit of like prestige and luxury. So for Singapore's sake, I honestly hope that this is the case, because it's not a useful way to go. Trust me on this, right? So now, another thing is that the red dotted line actually extends across, okay, into where the 12th house is. And the combination here, I'm not going to break it down one by one, okay? Because otherwise it's going to turn into a very boring astrology lesson. But this little cluster of planets here in the 12th house usually refers to power, control. We're looking at the aristocratic elite, right? So basically, it's the power behind the scenes, right? So it is where money is being controlled. Okay, so that's this is actually hard coded into Singapore's chart, just so you might like to know. But also that because of this heaviness that is affecting here, it does look like even the people who are usually associated with wealth and privilege and the advantages are not necessarily having a whale of a time. So sometimes it can mean things like clamping down on certain inequalities. So that actually could be a positive thing, but it can also mean things like, for example, for some of you who are paying attention to this right now, listening to this, you could be considered, say, high income, for example. And while most people, it's quite interesting that most people will never think of yourself as being the elite or the privileged. But I suppose if you look into the entire world, just about everybody in Singapore is considered privileged and elite. And it does mean that this pessimism and this heaviness can also mean the cutting down of the elite. So that means could there possibly be restructuring of the way work is being done, and this is very gradual. Okay, so this is not going to be a tsunami where suddenly everybody gets like a 30% pay cut. I don't think it's going to happen that way, but it's there are discussions about how things can be restructured. Okay, so I mean, if you're considered high income, then you could be on the list. Most people don't think of yourself as high income, right? But that's why I say it's a reality check, because people are looking at more sustainable ways, because some things just can't remain that way, right? So things on income, finances, and also the availability of resources. And what this also means is that as a society, you could be seeing things like restrictions on things here and there. You also have to be realistic in terms of there are countries who are not having a great time right now. So logically speaking, things like supplies, not just the availability of resources, but also whether or not resources can reach different parts of the world. And naturally, of course, prices are going to reflect the difficulty. And that means availability of resources. There could be small things. And I've got to be quite, the word is not really careful, but rather I'm tapering my language mainly because the truth is there is a very good administration here in Singapore. So you are very unlikely to see like a panic situation. But people who are paying attention to what's happening in the newspapers may notice small changes here and there that starts to limit like resource availability. And the fact is we could be looking at a war situation. In fact, the war is a situation right now, right? So you have to wake up and smell the coffee, right? So now another thing here is that then naturally, of course, then you should be expecting some policy changes. And you'll find that the policy attempts to try and improve employment. Okay, and this is not new to anybody who's familiar with Singapore. It's a genuinely good administration in the sense that if there's a situation going on, then naturally, of course, new policies will come up to try to sort of like make sure that the employment situation doesn't go like out of hand. Healthcare, naturally. So it's like new policies will start to channel resources, and that makes sense, right? So things like inequality. You may also see new movements when it comes to legal systems, crime. That's starting to pile up. If you've been reading the papers, it's showing up, right? So and what we have here is this cross, this gigantic cross that goes across Singapore's chart. And unlike what we saw yesterday with the Latvian situation, this is not really a stalemate, but rather this kind of cross is more about the idea of constant change. So if you live in Singapore, or if you do a lot of business with Singapore, you're going to start to see is this idea of like there's this flux, right? So you're going to start feeling like maybe from month to month, from quarter to quarter, because there are changes showing up. There some of it is limitations, some of it is opening things up. So there's this delicate balance that, like I said, we are very lucky to have like a really decent administration. So that balance keeps coming, and quite frankly, is so dependent on what else is happening in the world. And as what you saw yesterday, that situation is changing very rapidly from month to month. So that means, is it going to be a bit harder? If you're in an organization, would it be a bit harder to make sort of like mid to long term plans? Possibly, because then you're going to have to make adjustments. So the good news here is that this isn't new to Singapore. We kind of had a bit of a dress rehearsal on this, right? So everybody remembers what things were like in 2020 when basically today open, tomorrow close, and then today open half. And it's like you kind of had to read the papers on a day-on-day basis to know what to expect. And I don't think that's a prospect that really scares people anymore, because you kind of went through like a dress rehearsal on this. But yeah, so I mean, do I see this as a disaster? No, there isn't a disaster indication here. Maybe inconvenience. I like to sort of remind the people who live in Singapore here that what is a minor inconvenience to you is war in other people's countries. So not really a big problem. Okay, so now, the only thing is that because of the amount of flux, so although it doesn't cause an immediate problem, so what I've added on to the astrology chart here is the planet Pluto right at the very bottom here. And Pluto is the god of the underworld. So in the Chinese, we'll call him Yan Luo Wang. He's Hades. He's god of death, right? So when it is down here in the fourth house, sometimes it affects the people on the ground. So basically, it's the mood on the ground. So this isn't a terrorist attack. This isn't like people going bankrupt on the ground. Doesn't look like it, but it does look like there are concerns more about people are just concerned, generally speaking, and it doesn't address the insecurity on things like inequality and potentially crime. So you may notice some of those things, and people are just going to be a little bit on edge, perhaps, and that's why, if I may, like I said, today, towards the end of today's presentation, I'm going to talk a lot more about the industries that I think are going to be big, and maybe there are a few things that can happen there that can maybe alleviate some of these concerns. So it will be strongest towards the end of the year. So and especially as if we see what else is happening in the world right now, you will have noticed from what I presented yesterday and a bit of what I'm going to present today that it's going to pile up, right? So from the middle of the year until the end of the year, other countries' concerns are going to start piling up, and naturally, it's going to be strongest, right, in Singapore around this time, right? So moving forward, that also in the middle part of the year, we could start to see some movements with leadership. So in fact, this red line here, so again, the blue planet is when like chaos or change starts to happen. In Singapore, it's unlikely to actually be chaos, but it's just change, right? Like a fresh new leadership. So when it is, especially as the red line connects to this black section at the very top. So in a country's chart, this black line at the top actually refers to the leadership. So in Singapore, our system is such that we have two leaderships, one being the president, the other being the prime minister and the cabinet, of course. So now, what you can see with the dates that I've put here, we started out with the 16th of August. That was last year. So, and this was something that I kind of covered in some of my previous webinars, people who have listened to it. I did sort of say that in Singapore, we are going to get a new leader in about August. Did I just say last year? Okay, it's still this year. So we just had a new president, right? So well, it wasn't August, it was very early of September, but you know what I mean, right? So around the 16th of August was when the campaigning began, when the nominations came in. So, it was accurate, right? So basically on the 16th of August, we had a new leader. But you see, this idea of the fresh new leadership wasn't just August of this year. In fact, it will last throughout the entire of 2024, even reaching all the way into the first quarter of 2025. So that means we are moving into a year of leadership renewal. Again, this should not surprise anybody. We are due for a leadership renewal. And yes, we are. And also, the other logical thing is that Singapore does have to call elections before November of 2025, if I'm not wrong. So this could be. It also could suggest that potentially next election may not take as long as November of 2024. It could be earlier. So I'm just making an intelligent guess. I don't know, right? So you could be looking at, of course, with this blue planet here, you should be expecting like fresh changes. It is the planet of chaos. So what this means is that we may see it in the form of dramatic changes. So in terms of like who's in charge of whatever, and again, it's not a surprise, right? So that like if there's going to be a cabinet reshuffle, if there's going to be new people in charge of new departments, that should not surprise anybody at all. So it's quite expected, right? So the only thing is that you may still find like people may still have the usual complaints. It's like, okay, we've got new people, but then it's like maybe they're still the elite aristocracy. You're probably going to get people coming from the usual sources, but you are going to get a new leader probably during this period, right? Not rocket science. Okay, so here's the good news here is that it does look like this new leadership, the chart suggests, especially as we have Venus crossing over this line here. So the black line that it's crossing over is an engagement line. And this is interesting because it means sometimes in a country's chart, it can mean the way in which the people in charge are connecting with the public. And in some other countries, the strange thing is in most countries around the world, I'm seeing a lot of animosity between the leaders and the people. So the good news is that at least what I see on this red dotted line I've just added, it does look like there's a lot more of the engagement. And this looks like exciting engagement. It might come across as conversation. It can be more interaction. There's more on the ground relationship. That's what I'm basically saying. And of course it's going to this square that you see here, this 90-degree square, means that it's not necessarily what people are used to. So and the indications in Singapore's chart tend to show the usual leadership. Like what is hard coded into the Singapore's chart is a leadership that is more aristocratic, perhaps a little bit more business-like, and a bit more stiff, maybe like I know better than you sort of thing. But what we are going to see is a much more youthful, a much more flexible sort of space. And as a Singaporean, I can't see that as being necessarily a negative thing, that there's going to be more interaction. So, I mean, yay, right? So, and this is going to be strong. There are a few periods that I have identified here. So the first one actually was this year. So around the time with August, September. So we passed that now, and we got a new president around that time. So this upcoming year, we're going to see one period that is between August to October. That's always a nice time because that's, National Day, right? So that's always a nice time to introduce new things because people are quite high and they like to sing songs. But it does look like there is another period that is between February and March, and that comes actually the following year. So two periods where you may see things that involve fresh new leadership. What specifically is going to happen, I have no idea. Your guess is as good as mine. But like I said, so far when I identify these periods, I'm usually quite accurate. Could be wrong this time around. Okay, so now I did want to share a few more things here that quite frankly, even if I wanted to squeeze Singapore as a hotspot and tell you all the horrible things that are going to happen, I'm not seeing a lot of it. Okay, and that's me being honest, right? So even if I tried to make up stories, I can't, right? So basically, yes, there's going to be a bit of pessimism. We are going to be a bit short of a few things because other countries are not functioning at 100%. But I don't see a disaster. Having said that, there are a few things I mentioned yesterday when we were looking at the earth to air. And if I'm being honest with my audience, whom I know is probably majority who live and work here in Singapore, is that if you are paying very, very close attention to what we're talking about with this earth to air thing, the things that are working for Singapore right now is very, very Earth era. So the long-term sustainability, and that's why I keep emphasizing about this thing about the short-term sustainability and the long-term sustainability. And it's quite important, even more important if you ask me, that we are paying more attention to the transition from Earth to air. Now, I deliberately included South Korea in today's presentation because when a country is not facing a very good situation, and when people wake up and realize that this can't go on, if it goes on for another year or two, we are all going to die, right? So if the situation is that bad, it actually forces people to sit down and think about, okay, this doesn't work. Not in the long term, it doesn't. It really doesn't work. And then that they are actively trying to find a solution. Now, however, if the fire is not burning your backside, and that means that there is no urgency whatsoever to change anything at all. So basically, it's so easy for people to stay put. It's like being in the Roman Empire when the far reaches. The Roman Empire is very big, right? So if you're in the main Rome area, it's easy to lie to yourself that the Mongolian army or the Han army isn't coming for you. And that means especially they didn't exactly have internet. So basically they can pretend that they don't really know that the far reaches of their empire was being invaded. So and if you are still enjoying your meat from Spain and your milk from Australia, it's very easy to not realize that this is not sustainable. Right, it really isn't. So, and this is why I have a few statistics as part of the research that I've done as looking into a longer term thing. So today I'm not presenting the astrological portions. I'm still working on it. There's a lot of calculations to do, but I did want to talk about of course in this slide I mentioned specifically a quote here from Senior Minister Mr. Teo Chee Hean, but it's not just Mr. Teo. I don't think he's the only person talking about this need for innovation. And I would like to share with you some of these stats that I have found easily on the internet. You will find them if you're looking for them as well. So this survey had been done to study young people in ASEAN, so in the Southeast Asian area. So you should see countries like Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, they're all surveyed here. And the question that young people was asked is that how interested are you in innovating and potentially being entrepreneurial, like basically working for yourself. And what you see here, the results are quite startling because it seems like the most entrepreneurial people, youngsters, are in Indonesia and Thailand. So the stats here, in case you can't see, they are in the 30-something%. So we are looking at maybe 1 in 3 people, young people in Indonesia and Thailand are actually thinking about, okay, can we create something? Because that's what entrepreneurship really is. I know in the Earth era, entrepreneurship is associated with making billions of dollars, but that kind of really isn't the case. Like entrepreneurs look for solutions and they create solutions. And so even the other countries like Vietnam and Malaysia, we are still looking at maybe 1 in 4 young people who are looking at starting their own businesses, right? So basically they're looking for solutions that people can buy and use, right? But what you see here is the Philippines and Singapore actually rank the lowest, with Singapore being only about 17%. That's pretty sad actually. That's maybe 1 in 6, 1 in 7 maybe people, youngsters in Singapore who are even thinking about starting their own business. And what this means is that most people are out there looking for a job. Essentially, they're just waiting to go to a company, apply, and get paid at the end of the month, but not necessarily actively sitting somewhere and thinking, can we create something? So what I'm trying to say here is that the reason why you may see a lot of the leaders talking about how we need more innovation here is because the people here are not very innovative at all. It's not very air era. So, and if you were to compare this, the number of entrepreneurial youngsters, if this study is to be believed, is about half that of Indonesia and Thailand. Basically, Indonesia and Thailand are, if this study is to be believed, and if the entrepreneurs actually go on and start businesses, you will have double the amount of innovation occurring in Indonesia and in Thailand than you actually get in Singapore. So basically, and as I mentioned multiple times, that getting a job is an Earth era thing. So that means in no other eras is having a job a thing. So it's at least not something that the regular person does. So that's why I say that if your jobs are safe, and you have a really good government who ensures that people don't lose their jobs, because that's not what's happening in South Korea. People are jobless in South Korea, which means they know that getting a job doesn't work in this new era. I'm not sure Singaporeans understand this portion. Okay, let's go on, right? So that's the concerning bit. Now, the study goes on. So there are multiple questions that they ask. And again, they surveyed all the ASEAN kids from the ASEAN area. And the question was, if you see at the bottom here, that the gray sections, the white sections are, I would like to work in my home country. And the orange ones, I would like to work in another ASEAN country, so in our neighbors. And the blue sections are people who like to work outside of ASEAN, so maybe in Europe or in America or in Africa or somewhere outside of our region. And so what you can see here is that Singapore is right in the middle there. And Singapore has almost 66% of our people who want to work in Singapore. So that means we're looking at young people, maybe only 1 in 3 are even considering the possibility of working outside of Singapore. So statistically, what this tells a lot of Singaporeans, I mean, just looking at the stats, right? Basically, the vast majority of young people here want to be employees, and the vast majority want to be employees in Singapore. Right, so that's what the stats actually say. Now, if you look at most of the other countries, of course, there are countries like in Indonesia where it's interesting, because 60% of the Indonesians would like to continue working in their own country. And quite frankly, this makes sense because Indonesia is the biggest among the ASEAN countries. It has the biggest population. So does that logically take away all the economic factors? It actually does make sense because the country is pretty big, right? And then you also get places like in Vietnam, for example, where more than half would like to continue working in their own country. But there are countries where, especially in the Philippines, especially in Thailand, where in fact less than half of them want to continue working in their own countries. They are much more open, whether is it working in ASEAN or working in other countries. There's a lot more interest. So whether they do it or not is another thing, but they're at least interested in connecting with other places and doing more things. And so basically, I'm just looking at these statistics, and as a Singaporean myself, I'm also thinking about, okay, that's a bit of a very small view of the world. They are not actively looking for solutions, and everybody just wants to be an employee in their own country. You have your own views, and you can look around at the people around you and decide whether the study is accurate or not. And is there something to be concerned about? Okay, so that's something I just wanted to share here. Okay, so that's there. And I also found this research that had been done by the Pew Research Center, where if you look at the list of countries that are here, you realize that they're all the rich countries, right? So you got people like Japan, France, like you don't see Gabon and Nigeria here, right? So we're looking at the rich countries here. People, it would be considered the who's who of the Earth era. So these are the countries with banking and multinational companies, right? So the question that Pew had asked people was that they asked, did you think that your children are better off or worse off than you? Now, if you look at Japan, the statistics are dismal. So the 82%, 8 out of 10 Japanese people actually feel that their kids are more screwed up than the situation is more screwed up for their kids than it is for them. So the kids are not going to have a good time. Same thing for France, same thing for Italy, Canada, and the whole lot of them. And in fact, you realize that it's only at the bottom of the chart where from Sweden and maybe Poland onwards that maybe it starts to maybe measure out a little bit. Now, of course, the country with the best statistics is the one right at the bottom. Apparently, more Israelis thought that their kids are better off than them. But I have to say that this survey was done last year. I'm pretty sure Israel might have changed their mind about that by now. And if you take Israel out of the picture and Sweden, that's 46 and 47, so they're kind of equal. The only country on the entire list of rich countries who think that their kids are better off than them is Singapore. And it's the only country, and it's not just the only country, it is starkly, significantly higher than the people who think that the kids are not better off. So, and I was so struck by this. I was so struck by this. And like I said, Singapore is the exception everywhere. Whether I'm looking at economic data, whether I'm looking at the attitudes of young people, it's quite insane. And I also looked at the charts, and it seems like every country is having a bad time, except Singapore. I really tried to give you guys a bad Singapore outlook. I can't, right? It's going to be really peaceful compared to every other country, and only Singaporeans think that their kids are going to be better off than in any other country, and it's huge, right? So I can only come to a conclusion at this point that there are only two possibilities. Okay, so possibility number one is that the government is truly and utterly the best government in the world. So that's a real possibility, that they really are the best beyond any other government in the world, and that we are going to be this cyberpunk, very tech focused, and everyone's going to have jobs, everyone's going to have food, and it's going to be brilliant, right? So we are going to be in bright lights while the rest of the world looks not so good, right? So we could be like that little tiny oasis in the middle of, like, you know, a war zone, right? Or the other possibility is that we are living in a bubble, right? So you take of it what you will, and yeah, it's like I'm not an economist and I'm not a politician. I'm an astrologer, and my job is to look at data, and the data is very interesting. No matter where I look, Singapore is an exception. I can barely find anything where Singapore fits in with just about the rest of the world. We are in a story of our own, right? So I don't know about you as a Singaporean. I'm hoping and praying that that bubble is titanium. It better be titanium, right? Because we are the only ones saying a different story from everyone else. Okay, so that's all what I have to say on Singapore. Okay, you make of it what you will. Okay, so the next thing is Malaysia. Okay, so that's the neighbor. So that's the other country in the hotspot. Now, Malaysia. I've been featuring Malaysia a lot on my prediction webinars because Malaysia is also undergoing a sea change, and a lot of it is already quite apparent, just like the way it is in South Korea, and later as I talk about some other countries, right? So now, first of all, is that there is an awakening of beliefs, and I think people are getting a lot more interested in roots, culture, history, where people come from, and stuff that happened a long time ago. So and the period that is more that I put here is between July to December. So we are still in this period. And I've covered this period in previous webinars as well. So what you kind of see here is that there is a fragmentation of ideology in politics. Now, and the thing is, similarly with Singapore and with South Korea, you actually have this red dotted line that cuts across the 6th and the 12th house. So, and this is a pattern that I see happening a lot in most of the Asian countries. This is a pattern that I see happening in this part of the world that it's not a pattern that shows up in the other side of the world. Very interesting. And like I said, my job is to be an astrologer, right? And when I see the Neptune that's here, sometimes it can refer to a few things. So first of all, I don't think this is a health thing. There are no indications to show that there is a health crisis in Malaysia. So don't quote me saying that. But could it affect things like the job situation? Yes. So that means, could we see an erosion, a dissolving of certain industries, certain job opportunities? Probably. Okay, and this is this particular thing has been there for a number of years now. So it actually started in the COVID years, and it is extending to just about now. It's ending off about now. And so, and also the other thing that we see here is that this red dotted line actually creates a connection between Mercury, so this purple planet, and Neptune, where there is mental confusion. So mental confusion means that it could be communication that isn't clear. So maybe the story that is being told from one day to another may change. So that's one way in which communication can be not clear. Now, another one is that people are talking to each other, but it's like they cannot understand what the other person is saying. So, and it's also that it's hard-coded in Malaysia's chart that this purple planet here is an indicator for things like politics, the law, religion, and ideology in general. So what you essentially start to see is a case of where there are different stories that are being told, and sometimes the stories don't always make sense to each other. So there's a communication problem. Okay, moving forward is that we also have there is, let me see this. Okay, so what you have here is this. The chaos planet is here. I just forgot to put in the dotted line. So the chaos planet is here in the seventh house, where, as I mentioned, this seventh house can also describe the relationship between the people who are in charge and the people. So when you have this chaos, but it's either chaos or it can be a fresh new perspective. And in this case, because it is affecting the line is missing here, yeah, that is actually affecting Jupiter that's here. So basically it affects how people see things. It's a paradigm of a perspective of how something is being seen. And so it does suggest that there could be more of a populism, or perhaps this idea that maybe we need to sort of redefine a few things about how what the country thinks is correct or wrong, or what we might accept and not accept. And this, like I said, is not a new placement. It's been there just about the COVID period, and I've covered it in past webinars. So this is why you are starting to notice that, for example, I mentioned that the cancellation of the music festival, that there is perhaps a bit of a rise of some conservatism. And you'll find that there is a bit more support for ideas that support more of the roots or more conservative beliefs. So that means, could this sometimes mean a little bit less openness to some of the things that have been introduced in the Earth era when it comes to globalization, where people have been very, very tolerant. And just like with all Earth eras in the past, whether this was the Roman Empire or the Song dynasty, you find that when you have different nationalities coming together to do business in a marketplace, well, you can't have the Turkish person like saying bad things about the Chinese person, because then they want to do business together. And I think as the globalization starts to sort of ebb a little bit, you may find that then there's a lot less when there isn't a lot of interaction, then of course some of these misunderstandings may start to occur a bit more often, and this could become strong November and December, which is about now. Okay, so between this month and next month, there could be a bit more of this awakening that's showing up. Okay, so now next is that we also have, by the time we get to, I've made a bit of a mistake here actually. No, actually I haven't. Okay, so no, this is correct. Okay, so around now also, that you start to find that there is a bit more of the openness for changes. And the reason is because, as I said, this blue planet is here, so people are ready for like a fresh new perspective. And the fact that the dotted line sort of goes between 8 and 2. And this can mean changes to the monetary system. It could be because Malaysia, as I mentioned yesterday, is very concerned about some of the shared monies. And you may be familiar with EPF and things like that. It's actually it's a shared money for the entire country. So if there's a concern about financial security, then could we also see reform, like some form of financial reform or rules that are changing? It could be that it might be necessary. And another thing is that sometimes you may also find that similarly, values in astrology actually belong to the same space. Whether you're talking about monetary value or principal values, they actually belong to the same place in an astrology chart. So that's where people start to decide that there are differences in how you want to value things as well. And you'll find that the leaders will start to need to quell a lot of restlessness, especially if there's a lot of changes, or if people feel like, okay, this thing doesn't work, there's going to be the need to quell it. So the time period is not exactly just 2023, but you find that towards the end of next year, it becomes stronger, especially with regard to the restlessness, especially if some of these rules are not so comfortable because people don't like change. So that's how it is. So I'm just sharing some of the statistics here that because of demographics changes, so the estimation here by demographers is that, so things like, and this is happening worldwide, that the compositions will change. So you will find that about 70%, okay, of Malaysians will be Muslims in about 30 to 20 something years time. And I got this from a newspaper report that about some 86% of Malaysians have said in the poll that they are in favor of making Sharia regulations the official national law. So the thing is, it's about also looking at what the majority of the population wants. It's not just Malaysia. As I said, South Korea is going to start to change what they think is the right culture for them, that we, even if we are Korean, we don't really believe in like cramming for exams anymore because it doesn't make sense, right? So you're going to see that happening a lot in the era, that it's a redefinition of what people want. And as I said, you want to be very suspicious if your country is not looking at redefinition. Everyone is looking at redefinition, and only 1 or 2 countries are not looking at redefinition. Okay, so yeah, and that's when in 2024 you find that most of the black sections in Malaysia's chart actually occur in the last part of the year, between September to the first quarter of the following year. Okay, so you might see some legislative changes that could start to shift around that time in a very clear way. Okay, so I have one more hotspot to cover, and it's the big one that everyone is waiting for. So I've got Hong Kong, Taiwan, and of course China. Okay, so let's start with Hong Kong. So Hong Kong hasn't had very good years. Some of the background here is that a lot of their population has left. A lot of experts have described this as a brain drain, because many of them have gone to places like Australia, to the UK. Some of them are here in Singapore. And so the thing is, and this also means that a lot of the wealth is going out of Hong Kong. So some of the things that I see here is, and this is a very long period, by the way. So it starts as early as this year. It will stretch all the way until January of 2026. So that means we are talking about the next 2.5 years even. And what you'll see here is that there will be a lot of control measures. Pluto here tells you that the control of the community will increase. So that means civil liberties and what people can say, what people can do, what people can talk about in the media. So you'll find that a lot of the communities that are not aligned will be forced to disband. And this has already started happening for some time. And so you'll find that naturally, so the red line actually affects the Venus, Neptune. So these 2 planets here. So and these are the indicators for things like youth. So basically, it will start to drive even more young people away from Hong Kong. And it also means that, unfortunately, this is also an indication of driving wealth away. So you'll start to find that the pattern is not going to stop. In fact, it's probably going to exacerbate. And also what I do see here is that the period in 2024 is going to slow Hong Kong's economy even further down. Okay, so, and this is going to be again strongest in the last part of next year and all the way until the first quarter of 2025. Okay, so this is not the Hong Kong that I grew up with. Is basically what I'm saying. Okay, so got this from CNN that according to a poll and a study, is that nearly half of all the foreign businesses in Hong Kong are planning to relocate. So this will definitely involve foreigners leaving. It will definitely involve maybe young people potentially relocating to other cities, and also investment that will leave the city. I also have some statistics from last year's economy that their merchandise export actually dropped 15%. And the value of their exports have also fallen by another 13%. So this is a big thing, because Hong Kong has been one of the shining tigers of the Earth era. And when we talk about the Eastern tigers, Hong Kong is always on the list. And I'm not sure that the tiger is roaring in the next few years. And also that the exports to Asia, these are actual numbers. I'm not making this stuff up, right? So you can find this on the internet. It's already happened, right? So the exports are down. Okay, so that's for Hong Kong. And of course, we want to look at the next tiger, which is Taiwan. Okay, so the first thing is that from about May onwards, okay, so the economic disruption is coming from a few factors. Okay, so the first of all is that we have the chaos planet here in the 8th house. And the number 8 house is shared monies. And shared money can also refer to things like investments. So where there's a combination of local money and outside money, right? So, and because the chaos planet is very close to where Mars is, so this red planet in astrology is basically an indicator for things like military presence. In good times, it doesn't always mean military. It can mean that they start to become aggressive with their marketing and selling more things, which does not make sense in the context of what we are seeing right now. It's very unlikely that Taiwan is going to be suddenly getting a lot of foreign investors wanting to invest in their country right now. So what is more likely to happen is an increase in military presence. So whether is it a local military or is other country investing their military presence in Taiwan is another way of interpreting the astrology here. So we can expect, because it cuts across the 8 and 2, and this is the money axis in a country. So similarly to kind of what we are seeing with Hong Kong also, you will start to find that trade investments start to maybe not want to stick around where the soldiers are. And so and also more easily affected by external economic conditions, and also with your major trading partners. And it's important to actually pay attention to who are the major trading partners in Taiwan. So, and now further is that this starts to affect the people. So any lines that start to affect the moon in an astrology chart, in a country's chart, means that the average person, your auntie, uncles, and your grandparents start to get involved now. So you'll find that the changes to the economic situation, Neptune is also here in the 6th house, which means could there be lack of jobs? Could there be basically less economic activity? That makes logical sense, right? And so it starts to affect people, and that means could this mean things like employment or income issues? It will start to be an issue from May onwards. So that's in about half a year's time. So this economic disruption will be strongest in the second and the third quarter of next year. Okay, so and so I got this off Channel News Asia that squeezed by inflation and low salaries, basically the young adults in Taiwan, similarly to what we are seeing in Hong Kong and in South Korea, that graduates are spending a third of his salary renting a tiny toilet room, right? And some people say that they can only afford a home if they don't eat or drink for 20 years. So they're describing themselves as being stuck right now. And that's why, I mean, I'm such a broken record, but I want to appeal to a lot of Singaporeans and say that it is only in our country that we think that the youngsters are going to be better off than us. Just saying, right? So, and also that so Taiwan's economy has already fallen into a recession. So the GDP has really gone down first quarter of this year. And also right now the blame is being put on the fact that semiconductors, which is of course their money spinner, is starting to be a bit of an issue, because people are building their own semiconductor factories. I mean, you don't want to be beholden to one place in the world where you get your semiconductors, especially as all your satellites and all the electronics that's around you all have the chips in them. So nobody wants to be beholden to Taiwan. It makes sense, doesn't it, that basically people are relocating this. And that means Taiwan is starting to see a lot less demand. I think it makes perfect sense, right? And like I said, the issue with the trade partners is that whether you think of it as proximity, geographical proximity to China or whichever, that even as Taiwan gets a bit stuck sort of between the China-US thing, that the truth is China's trade with Taiwan is far bigger than what it does with the United States. So here are some stats, right? So mainland China and Hong Kong account for 42% of Taiwan's exports. So 4 out of $10 that are being exported out of Taiwan is with China. So China is their biggest customer, and the US only has a 15% share. So it's a huge difference. And 22% of their imports actually come from China. So the point that I'm trying to make here, guys, is that the truth is Taiwan and China have a symbiotic relationship. They need each other. So China buys a lot of what Taiwan produces and vice versa. So they are probably among the biggest trading partners with each other. Okay, so it's a fact, right? So, and what you see here is naturally that right now Taiwan, for the last couple of years, has been asking their companies, their startups, to maybe not be so dependent on China. Maybe you can explore doing business elsewhere. So that's been happening, and it's probably one of the reasons that's also creating a bit of an issue with, at least in the short term, with regard to Taiwan's economic performance. I'm not an economist, I'm just the astrologer, okay? So when we look at Taiwan, it does look like by the time we get to the end part of the year, as I said, it's in the middle part of the year where you start to see the economy seriously floundering. By the time we get to about October, then what you see here is that, and although a lot of people are expecting to hear a lot of like military problems, but it doesn't look like it. In fact, the issues here seems like the number one issue is an economic issue. So that by the time they're looking for a foreign intervention is because there's no money, right? So that the leaders are unable to find solutions. So of course, they are reaching out for international resources. So what that is, I don't know. IMF, UN, maybe, ASEAN, maybe, right? I don't know. But it does look like there is a lot of tensions because then international negotiations have to proceed here. So with regard to what they're discussing, your guess is as good as mine. But basically, Taiwan will be asking for help, and the indications here does not look like it is not military help. Okay, it looks more like financial economic assistance. Okay, and what I also see here is that, like I said, the chaos planet is now connecting to the sun, and the sun in any country's chart has a lot to do with things like leadership. So in this case, we would be referring to the Taiwanese prime minister and the cabinet. That it starts to be that as more players are getting involved with Taiwan. In fact, as of now, there are already a lot of players getting involved in Taiwan's issues. But as more and more people start to get involved, if foreign intervention comes in, then the leaders start to not be able to have the grip on being able to make changes, right? So because then there are more parties, there are more entities to consider. So I mean, that's happening, right? So it gets strong from about October onwards. Okay, so basically, that's another tiger that I think will not be roaring very loudly in 2024. Okay, so, and the biggest tiger of all is China, right? So what can we expect? I've only started including China in my last, 2 or 3 webinars. I never really bothered with them in the past, and you might see why. Okay, so the economy isn't doing great either, and part of it is also because we it's not one country by one country, right? Basically these 3 tigers, they operate together. It's a hotspot for a reason, and that means by about July, what I actually see here is that this red line that cuts across here is both Saturn and Saturn, and as I mentioned earlier, Saturn is not an easy planet. Basically, it's mature, it's hard, it's like looking at hard truths, right? So it does look like, and especially for them, it's playing in the 1-7 axis. So this is in agreements. So whether these are political agreements or financial agreements, I think it's all of it. And the chart suggests that China is taking a hard stance with their partners. So basically, people who kind of don't like this inflexibility will basically disappear. They'll just say, okay, I don't want to play this game anymore. And unfortunately, the chart also suggests that a lot of these people are going to be the elites. They are going to be the rich people, the wealthy people. So that means China could potentially see a bit of but they kind of have been seeing a brain drain and a financial drain for some time already. And so what you also see here is that there's a general lethargy. Should not be surprising to you. This has been going on for a while in China now. So basically, there's no energy. So there's a weakness in the economy, and that means resignation goes both ways. It's people resigning jobs and also feeling resigned. Also things like the lack of productivity. And of course, I mean, when people are pushed to that kind of situation, then you'll find a lot of people are looking for easy money. And so the chart doesn't tell me what people are actually doing, but you see, the search for easy money can mean anything from scams to cheating and stealing things, or even like buying into very, very, very short-term investments where people just want to make a killing just to survive, maybe. And also you'll find that a lot of the trading partners who would normally be getting activity going, so you find that the trading partners, what the chart suggests is that they will be disappointing. So that means in terms of things like volume or how much activity is actually happening, it's going to be a bit on a downward trend. But having said that, I mean, other concerns apart, right? I mean, because this is a thing that's happening in that region. So especially as you look at South Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, it's like it should not surprise anybody. Okay, that this economy is not going to be, you know, the greatest. And in terms of this attacking, as I said, Mars has an indication of fighting, and it's traditionally in astrology when astrologers serve kings. I mean, Mars is fighting and military action. And in this case, it doesn't actually look like they are going to, like, you know, be attacking anybody directly. This is an indirect attack. So sometimes it could be like just saying things, right, or breaking agreements, or perhaps playing around with like an economic setup. But it doesn't look like I'm not going to commit that this is anything to do with dropping bombs or none of it, right? Not really. And it's going to be strong in around the first and the second quarter, third quarter of next year. And like I said, when it comes to things like trading partners, if you look at the economy of most countries, and if they rank the countries that they do business with, China is actually number one to more than half of the countries in the world. That's 120 countries. And what this actually means is that if China is down, and if what I see from the chart that the trading partners are not delivering, it means that everybody else in the world is not delivering. Sometimes not because they're trying to be unfriendly, but because the economy in general is a bit on the depressed side, right? So and you find like tech exodus is happening. So a lot of the emerging markets, places like Thailand, places like Vietnam, Cambodia, they are benefiting from the exodus of manufacturing. Again, this is not new. So this has been going on for a while now. And also, I also wanted to highlight that there is a symbiotic relationship between China and US, because they are also each other's number one trading partner. So basically, it's quite hard to, basically what I'm saying is that now that the Earth era is over, I'm trying to suggest that the trading and the economic objective is starting to not be their top priority anymore. And that's why, so is this idea of that the US could use exports and business to sort of counter China. That's the kind of stuff that you see in the newspapers nowadays. And this actually came up in Channel News Asia just a few days ago. I just added it into my PowerPoint slide that there are companies in China that are borrowing at a 50% rate because there's no liquidity. And it's like, I don't think I need to tell you that this is a quick fix solution, right? It's like that's paying back at 50% interest rate. I'm not really sure how this is going to work. So of course, the other thing is that the situation you're seeing with South Korea and Taiwan and Hong Kong about young people is also the case in China. This is making headlines everywhere. That in fact, the unemployment rate for young people in China is up to about 21%. And this is actually old data. I saw in the papers just recently that it's gone up to very, very close to about 22% already. So 1 in 5, more than that actually, and that they already started talking about like redistributing young people into the fields. Like we've heard that story before, right? And I don't know about you, I do know some Chinese young people. I'm not really sure they want to work in the field, so I'm not sure that's going to work this time. And also that 7.7 million people applied for 200,000 government jobs. It's like, if you think BTO applications are bad, this is way worse, right? So that's not going to be a lot of jobs going on around here. And a lot of these people are the graduates. So similarly with South Korea, people have been pushing kids into universities and the graduates are not getting jobs. So now moving even further, that by the time we get to about the middle of the year, China's going to start to try and affect people on a more personal level, because the people are getting affected now. So, and of course, the young people start to become very rebellious, and also that they start to challenge and disregard financial and debt agreements. The chart doesn't specifically say so, but I think if I were to make an intelligent guess, a lot of people are not going to be able to pay their mortgage. So it's a very similar situation as what we see in Canada. And that therefore, of course, if people are angry, then and there's a lot of people in China. So that means you're going to start to see a bit more rebellious behavior. This doesn't always mean that people are looting and killing each other. It doesn't say so. But it just simply means that people are deciding like just not to be very active, for example. And that escalates by the time we get to the third quarter. So moving even further is that even as these issues show up, but the chart also suggests that this is what I call a stoic response. Because if you were expecting, like most other countries where a lot of these knee-jerk reaction shows up, the funny thing is I don't see that in China. So it's like I don't see the government getting running around trying to solve the short-term problem. That actually they seem to be quite calm, interestingly. So basically a lot of the flamboyant posturing seems to be coming from other people, but that China actually reacts in a fairly stoic manner. If you've seen reports, right, there's just a guy sitting with a microphone and he just has a unexpressionless look on his face. And also that of course then this could also mean a slowdown in the market. That's a given, and that people would be very frustrated with the fact that this stuff is happening and the reaction doesn't seem to be major. And I don't know how this will work out, but the chart actually is quite specific on this. And so it becomes strong between November to February. So again, the end of the year when this becomes, the frustration is at the strongest. Now, I'm not done with China. So you'll see that one of the concerns is that because the unemployment rate is growing in that region, not just in China, but in the other countries as well, there's comparisons right now. In my research, I've seen a lot of the international organizations are legitimately worried that we can see similar patterns with what happened with the Arab Spring many years ago, when and the factors are similar, especially with regard to youth unemployment. So there is some concern about that. Now, the last thing I want to show you about China is that we are seeing what we call astrologically threats from the back door. And this actually is not a 2024 forecast. This is actually, I'm giving you a bit of a bonus. I'm looking at all the way until the following year. That there's a slowdown in resource availability. And most of the time in the Earth era, we think of resource as being money. And we are no longer in the Earth era. So resources are literal resources. That slowdown in resources means that the leaders have more problems on their hand that could be more important. And that means things like labor shortages. This could also potentially mean things like bank breakdowns, so that when certain functions don't quite work anymore, and also the fall in international trade. So that there will be a lot of noise in the media around this time. That already is, but I think it's going to step up further because it shows up on my chart that there will be a lot of anti-China content that is all over the media, more so than what you see now. And the last thing I really want to emphasize here is this last red line that's here, because Pluto is a danger, and the moon is the people, the regular people, and anything that's in the 12th house is things that come out of nowhere. It is it's like the way COVID just showed up out of nowhere. So it's like if I say a threat from the back door, it's that kind of thing. It shows up out of nowhere. And it does suggest that the danger, this is the god of death, and the danger is mounted at the back door, right behind here. And this can mean that the people themselves are fractured, and therefore it means that that if there's any kind of threats that show around now, it becomes all the more ominous because the people are not together, right? So, and what is this threat from the back door? You can draw your own conclusions, right? But basically, the threats become, and I've said here, it's 10 February 2025 onwards, and it will be stronger between March to July of 2025. Okay, so like I said, what threats these are, there are many ways that this can play out. One is the youth thing. So that means and it's a lot of young people. In terms of real numbers, there's a lot of angry people, right? So that's one possibility. Now, another is that the other possibility is that there's no actual fighting. It's like people just lie flat. So they tang ping and they bailan, and basically they don't want to participate in the economy. Now, could that be an attack from the back door? It's an unusual attack, but it could be. Like it's basically young people attacking yourselves. But remember, I talked about the resources. And in my research, it seems that China also has legit concerns about other resources that are very important, things like water. And in my research, I've been quite surprised to realize that actually for a country that is geographically so big, that actually China has a lack of water resources, and that which is why they also have to buy water from other countries. So it's really important, this trading partner thing. It's not just about money. Like I said, we are no longer in the earth era. So I don't think money is the number one concern. It's things like, is there water? Now, another thing is, now this is an old article. This was back when when COVID was still going on. Not sure if you remember, but there had been a series of blackouts in China where even the factories had to stop operating because they ran out of coal. And ever since the Ukraine war started, China has been buying natural gas like nobody's business. And what this tells you is that China has potentially a lack of fuel. And it means that it's a big country. It's not so easy to switch everything. And I don't think the renewable sources are actually, replacing anything. So the truth is, as we look at resources, we could also see a potential that China could be short of the basic resources like water and coal. And especially if the trading partners are not delivering. So, and this becomes the biggest question here, isn't it? And that the other threat from the back door is the obvious one. Okay, so and the weird thing is that despite the challenges, the really tough challenges that I think or I see clearly in China's chart, the FBI in America is calling them the China threat. So it's like China is a very scary place, right? And so news from the US is saying like China has the world's largest navy. It's got 355 ships. The Pentagon is warning the world about how the navy is huge in China. And also it's very interesting, and a lot of it is very subtle, because then the US is saying that, oh, Philippines, don't worry, we will protect you if China attacks you. And we also have the US Department of Defense making a commitment to Japan that if China attacks, then we will commit to defending you. So China is a very dangerous country right now, that we will protect Japan. And so Taiwan is also now saying that, okay, the US military is preparing for war. And this comes from the Chinese analysts, that they are basically saying that, well, I mean, if you look at the facts, the US is preparing for war. And the Philippines has just revealed that there are 4 locations in the north of Philippines that are now US Army bases. So what you basically see is that there are a lot of commitments to the region, that the US is going to protect these countries if China were to attack. And Japan, who traditionally has not had a very strong army for a long time now because of treaties and stuff that came after the World War. So Japan has not been militarily major in the world. But so this is dated August of 2023. So that's just a few months ago, that they've released a military white paper that justifies, well, here's why we need to do war preparations against China, because the US feels that they need to protect us in case China attacks, right? So, and this is, I think this image is important. And I saw this and I thought it was interesting, that what you have here is this yellow line that you see here is known in American terms as what they call the first island line. And it starts all the way at the top here, where you've got Japan. So those are the Japanese islands, and the US is defending Japan there. And Japan actually has islands that go all the way down, and can you see like these little dotted dots here, that these are all Japanese islands, and they go all the way just behind where Taiwan is. And of course, there's Taiwan itself, which currently officially does not have military presence on it. And then you come all the way down here to where the Philippines is, and you can see all these bright dots here. Now, these are the locations of the new US military bases that are located in the Philippines. And of course, there are a couple more down here. And all the way down here, I know you can't see, it's right at the bottom, is where Singapore is where there is a US Navy base here in Singapore, where I'm from. And you can see some of these little submarines that are like here. And these submarines are stealth submarines. Nobody knows where they are, because they are so good that you can't detect them underwater. So they could be anywhere. I have no idea where these are. And some of these are coming from an agreement called AUKUS that comes with the UK and Australia and the US that involves a lot of submarines. You can go online and read by yourself. A lot of details here, lots of submarines, and they are somewhere in that water that nobody knows where those submarines actually are. So what you see here, guys, is known as the first island line. And I'm not making this up. You can just type it into Google and you can go read about it by yourself. Not my invention. Yeah, I mean, if you woke up in the morning and you went to your back door and you saw this there, I think you might be quite concerned. Okay, so that's what I was saying on the topic. Okay, so what I am putting out here is that now I've given you your forecast, right? So I've covered the Eastern Tigers. And I did promise yesterday that I want to really seriously look at, we can look at all the big boys and all the fights that they're going to have, but that's them, right? And a lot of us, we are not involved with this. We don't have a beef with any of these people, right? And that means even as we take a good look at the forecast, now the purpose here is not to scare all of us into oblivion, but rather, okay, we have to be realistic about what is actually happening. We can tell lies, but I prefer not to. So that means I would much rather we think very, very strongly about repurposing. So that means in terms of the resources that are available right now, as I said, it's quite important to think of this idea of a reallocation, because as I said, you have to look at a different set of priorities now. And that's exactly what I'm going to be focusing on after the break. So we are about 11:33 right now. I will be resuming at 11:45. I think that's a really good time. But in the meantime, I did want to share a couple of things. So there are two groups of people that I thought I'm just sharing some of these resources that you might want to sort of take on. But the first group are people who are business owners and leaders. Earth era, there's a way to lead an organization in the Earth era, and then there are considerations that come up for many reasons, depending on where in the world you're operating, and the insights of what is actually happening as it pertains to your business becomes extra important. So what I present here is the macro stuff, right? So that is what's coming up for everybody. But I think in terms of a business owner where there are specific concerns, then that's something that you could be looking at. Now, the other thing is that in terms of leading, especially as a lot of leaders are looking at reallocating your manpower, reallocating your financial and your other resources as well, it's very hard to find anybody who can talk about this topic, because most of the people that you will find out there are still giving Earth era advice, because they come from Earth era countries, they come from Earth era companies. All the charts that they're reading is from the Earth era, and there is no context there is no precedent, at least in their industry and their world, about what there is to come. And I'm specifically also looking at leaders who are not just looking at Earth era outcomes, which is like, which industry do I go into so that I can make the maximum amount of money? I'm not exactly sure that necessarily is the number one question, but rather is in the repurposing of resources, looking at leaders who are looking at more air era outcomes, and in terms of transiting your leadership into an air era outcomes. Okay, so that means when you look at things like charting your organization direction, and as you can see, I'm quite good at doing forecasts, right? So the thing is, for the right leaders, it can be very important where these forecasts can actually give a lot of fantastic insights and useful practical insights as to what needs to be done while we have time. Okay, so we have time now. It's maybe a year and a half. It's not a lot of time, but we have time, right? So that means allocation takes time and planning takes time. Okay, so now for another group of people are the people who are also thinking about repurposing your personal direction. I have a lot more to share after the break, but if you are thinking about like relooking your personal goals, that if you take stock of your own life and you realize a lot of your activity is all based on Earth era objectives, all the activities are on the assumption that the Earth era will continue, and I tell you it will not. Already happening in South Korea and Taiwan and Hong Kong. We're just weird, right? And that means that now if you are thinking about looking at interpreting your own chart, that means looking into your own resources. You may not be a business owner and you may not have like people following you, but if you're just one person, how can you start looking at your own abilities and how you can find a new role for yourself as things will change very drastically in the next few years. And also to uncover a lot of your own valuable strengths so that you can participate in what's happening with the world, which I'm going to share more after the break. But if you'd like to, you can scan these QR codes to get more information about how what astrology is doing, and all the things that we have been doing for years and years with astrology may be relevant to you. Okay, so I'm going to go on a break right now. I will resume at 11:45. Okay, guys. So it's 11:45. Let's continue. Now, I did make promise yesterday that in fact we also want to look at. So we've looked at the decline of the past Earth eras, but just as I did yesterday, I've extended my study of the past air eras, and that means we want to see what's emerging now. Even as it's quite obvious that a lot of like I said, the priorities will change, and the way in which resources are allocated are going to change. Now, most of it you have already seen happening in the world already, right? So basically, those are not new factors. Like I said, we are 3 years into the air era already. However, I thought that there are some very interesting things which I didn't expect to see when I was looking at the air era, and I thought that it creates a lot of opportunities for us to participate in the air era, even as some of the not great forecast is occurring. And I want to keep emphasizing that even as the big countries are like having a major issue with each other, that's not us having an issue with each other. And that means the people on the ground can start to make a very big difference to the experience of how we go through the next 2 or 3 years at the very least. So part two, I call it what happened in past air eras. So let's go on here. Okay, so if we look at a lot of the key phrases, so similarly to what I did earlier with the fire to the earthwards. So of course, these are the earthwords that we are familiar with. So every time we go into something, it's say if you decide on a new job, or to get whether or not you're going to invest your money into in your time and your effort also into a new venture. So these are the usual questions that we ask. So in the past, it could be you want to start something, and people's first concern would be, okay, what does the queen think about this? So it used to be like that, and whether it was going to make money or not was not their number one concern. And this is the part that would be very confusing for most of us, because this is the world that we come from. So things like, what's the ROI? What's the cost benefit analysis? Or if I spend this amount of time, like, does it justify my time? And when they say justify, they're not talking about how many people benefit. They're talking about how much money can I make, right? So that's a very classic Earth era way of looking at like a viability of a project, for example. So guess why nobody cares about climate change, right? Ain't going to make any money out of it. So, and also this idea of like being in the top 10%. So there are concepts in the Earth era that we're familiar with. It's things like competition. It's the reason why when we go to school, why people cram at universities all over Asia and sometimes in the West as well, because the whole idea is to be top 10%. That maybe you can occupy the top 10% of all civil service and MNC jobs in the world, and maybe you can be the top 10 biggest Fortune 500 companies. So this idea of economic competition is a big thing in the Earth era. And of course, I'm giving you a very big hint that economic competition is not the top priority in the air era. Guess why big countries are going to war with each other? If they cared about money, they wouldn't do it. It's not a very it doesn't give you a very good ROI in the long term, right? So so with regards to things like if you look at words like building, assets, even things like and efficiencies, for example, and in the way we think about efficiency in the Earth era is not the same as the way we think about efficiency in the air era. And that's why I think it's so important for me to show these words here. And I think even in the last 3 years, whether you count it from the pandemic, or some of my students have also told me that maybe some of these things have been failing even like in the years leading up to the pandemic, which I totally agree, but definitely much more after the pandemic. So when we look into the air words, so of course this is not an exhaustive list of words, but the words are not going to be very shocking to you because we already have them. The air era didn't just start 3 years ago. The air era started in 1981, before I was born. So basically, these words will not be shocking. So what we will see is actually that our world for the last 20 to 40 years is actually a combination of both sets of words like this. Right, so from 1981 onwards, the mobile phone, the internet, email, long distance phone calls. This was a thing. So communication was big in a way that it wasn't during the industrialization era, right? So that's pretty clear. We talk about things like online technology. It's not new. We kind of had technology in this way for quite a long time now. We've had machines, we've had automations for some time now, even in the factories, right? So we talk about things like research, things that are anywhere, viral. Come on, these are all not new words, right? And also, and I think some of the words on the right-hand side start to be a little bit newer. So that means I don't think it was so big in the 1981 period, but probably more maybe in the last 3 years. So especially during the pandemic, where we start to realize that when you're isolated, then you kind of really care about the quality of the relationships. And suddenly people suddenly woke up and realized that besides your colleagues and your family members, you kind of don't really have friends. And also things like fairness and equality that became a big issue, social causes, inclusivity became this big thing, LGBTQ, whether or not certain people of certain color were accepted in certain countries. Now that is like major right now. It was big, but wasn't as big as this. So the thing is, what you start to see is that the shift from earth to air in terms of our priorities is if you don't agree with this, you're probably not reading the newspapers, right? So, so even things like green or having more space, right? And the space that I'm talking about here is either our physical space. I'm also talking about outer space, right? So we cared about it, not like the way we care about it now, in terms of the kind of resources that are going to it and the interest that is in it. So even things that are not just fast, but we're talking about lightning fast, it has to be instant. People wanted it 5 seconds ago. So as you see that what is the real issue here is not so much about the words that we are adding on from the air era, because we've had these words for a while. It's the fact that the earth era words are going to disappear. They actually already have. It's the only reason why they're still around is because there are still old people around and the old people are still in charge. So that's why when we look at whether or not you agree with what a company is doing, but then you can criticize, but then their GDP is quite good, right? The P&L is quite good. So then everyone close their eyes, right? Which is what's happening. Now, guess why we are having a great resignation problem? Now, it's not that the salaries went down. In fact, strangely enough, in many industries, salaries went up. And in fact, during the COVID period where we thought that we would all be freaking out about how everyone's going to lose their jobs. But here's the weird thing. The numbers of people who actively, voluntarily quit their jobs was actually a lot higher than it was expected. You would think that people would hang on to their jobs, right? And one of the big issues was that people said that, well, I just didn't see a future in my industry. You found more and more people starting to describe what they are doing as a sunset industry, or that I show up at work and I'm just spinning the wheels. I'm not even sure why I'm there. And it's like we just go through and do the same reports again and again. Nobody is doing anything interesting. And it's like there are older people looking at their kids and going like, I think you don't join my industry. You know? So that became, that's like a thing now, right? So basically, like it or not, those earth words, they're disappearing. And this also means that yesterday, when I covered a lot of the industries that were big during our time, is going to disappear. And it's like, it's very small things like, this is like a digression, but a couple of weeks ago, there was a bomb that was discovered in Singapore, a World War II unexploded bomb. And I was following the reports on this. And I thought it was very interesting that it was reported that this bomb was potentially big enough to cause quite a bit of trouble for people. And so for the safety of all the people involved, they evacuated an entire section of town, right? And I'm sure many people have seen that in the newspapers. And I was very amused when I was reading the papers, and it seemed that for a lot of people, they assumed that the armed forces would take care of it, that it would be fine. No one's going to explode and no one's going to die. Like that part, they were very sure. The part they were not sure is like, is this going to affect the value of my property? And I thought it was so interesting that we even faced with the potential that a bomb could literally kill all the people who live there. The number one concern is like whether my property price is going to go down, right? So, I mean, I tell this story because you're going to start to see a lot of these misalignments of priorities that start to show up. Right, and you will see this over and over again. And even as we start looking at wars and everything, it's like somehow that there's always going to be a group of people who are used. I don't think this is not a blame game, but I think we are very used to looking at things from a very earth perspective. It's going to take a bit. it's going to take a lot, right, for people to make that shift. But I've been doing these webinars. This is my 11th webinar, guys. I've done this free for 11 webinars now, and I always tell the same story, right? So, okay, so next, let's go on. Okay, I promise I have new content. Okay, so then I've looked into the last 5,000 years of human history, and this time around I paid a lot of attention to the air eras, because I know at this stage it's important for me to more emphasis on like what are we preparing for. Okay, so and full disclosure, I mean, some of these things are not going to look great, but I also want to challenge a lot of our ideas, okay? And this occurred to me too, guys. Before you started looking at these slides, I had to look at it first, right? And it means that I also had to consider that when I think that, oh my God, this is bad, this is horrible, and I'm thinking of it through an Earth era perspective. So once I realized that, okay, if I take those lens away, then I can see things in a much more rational point of view. And I have to say this first, because if I don't, then it's just going to look like a terrible thing. But that's because you are pressing calculator and wondering how that's going to affect your bank balance, right? Now, if you can pause that for a while, stick with me, and I promise that there's going to be an end to this that give us a place to go, okay? So now there are a few themes, and I think the first one, I just go straight to it, okay? So that it is the end of great empires. And this is the thing in all air eras. So when I was doing my research, I was very interested, not so much in the Roman Empire, we know that story. I was very interested in what actually happened after they killed the last emperor. So it's like, okay, so what happened to all the people? Because now I want to know like what I'm in for, right? So in terms of the story here, was essentially that Europe broke up, right? Because basically the Roman Empire is a combination of many, many different cultures. And what it meant that people simply went back to their own cultures, right? And of course, lots of people would have lost their conventional job because you no longer have an administration. You don't have the Roman administration anymore. So even things like roads and certain markets, they were closed because then, you know, there were people with knives and swords and stuff. So nobody wants to go there anymore, right? And it meant that people had to learn to be self-sufficient. This is history. Check there's history books, right? So that means people actually went and reorganized themselves. So that means carpenters, fishermen, and people who were farmers, they had to find a new way of grouping together and sharing their skills with each other so that they could survive, right? And I think this makes sense. Now, similar things actually happened with the Song dynasty. And I think more than just the lack of actual financial resources, I think the bigger thing was the lack of a leadership. And when I say the end of great empires, it was that in the past, when a country wanted to do something, you had to pay attention to, well, how would Rome respond to this? And the same thing happens with the Song dynasty. And I see it in our world, that before you did something, you would think, okay, well, how would China or how would the US respond to this? But when you see, when there is no more government and when there's nobody actually in charge, it means that consideration is not there. Okay, so this is why when we talk about the great empires, like I said, what you had was Mongolians and various other groups of people who basically raised the Song dynasty with all its walls, everything. They raised it to the ground, right? It's fact, history books. And you also had the same thing happening in Rome. And you can check your history books. In fact, Rome had been sacked multiple times. So it wasn't like it got sacked once and then after that it fell. It wasn't like that. They got sacked once and then at some point it was so pathetic that the emperor had to rule from outside of Rome. Like it was so dangerous to be in Rome that he had to move outside of Rome and rule from elsewhere. And it was quite funny. There was even one year where they had 4 emperors because when an emperor went on, then he got killed by his own army and then another emperor went on, and it's quite fascinating history. There was one year they had 4 emperors on the throne, which is quite crazy. So, and the funny thing is the person who became the next emperor was the assassin. And then once he sit on it, then the next assassin come and then the guy become the new emperor. So it's like, you know, Game of Thrones in the highest way possible, right? So, but jokes aside, that was how the 2 other very big great empires of our history, that's how they ended lah. So I thought you might like to know, right? So, now, theme number 2 is that much as the Earth era was characterized by peace, and basically, like I said, most people are not troublemakers because they have jobs, and you kind of want to put food on the table, and you don't want to be a troublemaker because they put you in jail, right? So the thing is, the problem is that as the so-called government and administration starts to fail, you find that the barbarians start to show up. And in both cases, in the Song Dynasty and in Rome, it was barbarians. So of course, I put it in inverted commas because the word barbarians actually refer to a specific group of people. So Rome had been sacked by other people like the Visigoths, and there's another group of people called the Vandals. Today we think of Vandals as people who use spray paint and like draw on the walls and stuff, but the Vandals are like a real group of people, and they're called Vandals because they showed up in Rome and they started drawing on the walls, right? So that's why you call it a Vandal. But the thing here is that that's also a theme that we're seeing very often. So if you look into the history, the number one barbarian would be Genghis Khan. So they showed up, and according to the history books that I've been reading for the past couple of years, the Mongolians were described as being like uncivilized people. Because if you're looking at it from an Earth era, high-class Song Dynasty sort of view, right? Now, these people didn't live in buildings. They didn't have a system in that sense. They were pretty much like people on horses. Sorry. So the thing was that so they were barbarians to the high class Song Dynasty people. And you also get, now these are paintings that are from the era. And just by looking at these paintings, I think I don't need to tell you what happened to Rome. And you can see for yourself, this is what they meant by barbarians, okay? And I know it sounds like such a far-fetched idea that people could behave in this way, but we've seen it. We've seen it, right? It's shown up. Rome has been sacked once already. And both of the great empires had been sacked multiple times. Before the empire fell, we had our first official sacking. There are other places where this is happened shortly after the Trump incident. This happened in Brazil. Some people didn't like the result of the election, so they made their unhappiness known by showing up in large groups of people and vandalizing things and being barbarians, basically. We also have similar things happening in Asia where I'm not sure if you guys know about the Hindutva. It's a group of people in India who have decided that some religions, people of certain religions and certain colors are not welcome. And they've made their unwelcome very clear to the people who are not welcome, right? So, and we are seeing that a lot right now. Then the fact that there are all these groups of refugees like all over dotted around the world where they are not welcome, it's like it becomes a bit of a story here already. And it's the level of unfriendliness, we can pretend it's not happening, but it is, right? So open the newspapers and see for yourself. So the rise of barbarians is going to come up. And a lot of people have mentioned like the concern about things like weapons, that kind of stuff. And we may want to stop it. I'm not really sure what your plan is for stopping violence. There's a lot of these people. Okay, so now the theme number 3 is climate disasters. And I was, frankly, I was quite amused to see this because for the past few years, we've had all these international organizations, and you know how we're all like paying for plastic bags and trying to reduce waste. Now, I'm not saying those things are not good. And it's quite clear. Now, when we talk about the climate thing, and this is something that I've discovered from the research, is that there is a big difference between human-caused problems and not human-caused problems, right? So the obvious human-caused problem is the fact that we generate a ton of trash, and the rich countries are very good at throwing perfectly good food out of the window and down the dustbin, right? So that is definitely human-created problem. There's no argument about it, right? So the rich countries are putting a lot of factory black ash into the sky, and that part no one is arguing about. That is all human fault, right? And it's the fault of, frankly, the richest countries are the biggest culprits. That part no one is arguing with it. However, we also start to see a lot of these very strange climate things. So whether you're talking about like the glaciers are melting, the Alps are melting. I was in Europe, I saw the ice melt. It was quite scary. And you also start to realize that there are certain places that are way too hot. Like you go there and people are like dying of heat stroke and stuff, right? So, and the thing is that a lot of it has been drawn as a connection to the pollution that we're putting out there. And I'm not absolving the horrible companies from stuff, but I have to be honest, when I did my research, climate disasters is like a thing in every era. So this happened with the Romans, this happened with the Song people, and this happened with the Greeks too. So the funny thing is that, and when I say climate disasters, I'm not talking about the odd earthquake that we've had in Haiti and like the odd wildfire in some Indonesia, Canada. I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about the stuff that wipe out like the whole civilization. And you know how even as children when we were in school and we study all these ancient civilizations, and there's always this question mark moment where you sort of walk in there and you see this civilization and all the people disappeared, right? And you kind of, and kids will always ask, like, where did all these people go? If they are so advanced, then you know what happened, right? And climate disaster is always one of the things that's there, and the historians are never 100% sure what actually happened, you know. But I did do a lot of research to get these guys, and here's the proof, right? Now, first of all, that a lot of historians actually think that much as, yes, Rome created a lot of other political problems, so there are a host of reasons why the Roman Empire died, but one of the big reasons was actually climate change. And in fact, the temperatures started going crazy. And in those days, they didn't exactly have like observatories and like high-class scientists, right? They were very rich, but they're not very good with science, right? And the thing was that they didn't always understand why the temperature went insanely crazy and then all the crop died. So basically, you didn't have food. Remember, I said once the Earth era ends, the good weather has ended. So basically, the farmers' yield has fallen, and we see that now, guys, it's happening, right? And also because as the temperatures change, it also means that human bodies were not adjusting well. So that's one way. Also, the population very big, you see. So then basically they are all living in very dense areas in most city centers where diseases spread very fast. So hashtag COVID, right? So and you also get this idea of the plague. So the problem with the word plague, right, is that in the olden days everything is plague. Like as long as a lot of people die and then they call it plague. So there wasn't enough medical studies for people to know for sure exactly what bacterium killed them. We have a good idea, but no one knows 100% for sure. And this idea of the plague, actually there were two plagues that kind of killed the Roman Empire. One was the Antonine plague that happened a bit earlier, and the one that totally like wiped out half the people was the bubonic plague, and that was the one that we know a bit more about because there was more record, right? But the point here is that historians are right now sounding the alarm about the climate factors that led to the fall of Rome, and because all the experts are seeing the parallels, and it is uncanny, guys, right? So do your research and you'll be surprised what you find, and that we can learn a lot of crucial lessons by examining the natural forces that shape the rise and the fall. So good weather, don't take it for granted. Anyway, it's gone already. So next one is that now this is the picture of a lot of the American civilizations, whether you look at the Mixtec, the Teotihuacans, the Mayans. Hey guys, I studied them all, okay, because I really went and studied, and I wanted to know what happened to those civilizations, and I found this is there was a Mayan city called Mayapan, and it's major, it's like New York City for them, right? And in fact, the collapse has been linked by experts to specifically drought that happened in the 13th and 14th centuries. So this is actually from the last cycle of the air era. And that's just about the 13th century, actually. The 14th moved a bit into the water already. But so you can see that so the drought actually happened around the 1400 period, and it actually led to the entire collapse and abandonment of the whole city. So this is not one earthquake, guys. This is like wipe out the whole civilization, okay? Happened in history, yeah? Okay, now Angkor Wat. I haven't talked about this. This is another one of those civilizations that was fantastic in those days. If you study it, it's just amazing what Southeast Asian people are capable of doing. It wasn't just the Romans, right? So, you know, they are our shining star, right? And also that they collapsed. We know this, right? And apparently nobody actually 100% knows exactly why, just like with the Roman Empire. A lot of factors, but from what I've been able to see so far is that one of the big reasons was water. Now, because Angkor Wat actually has, from my understanding, I'm not a historian, yeah, my understanding is that they had a very advanced drainage water system, that it was a mixture of drainage and what delivered drinking water to the very, very dense city population, as we do in all our major cities right now. But you see, the weather started to do very weird things. So there were times where there was just no rain, it just didn't come, and so there was no water, and it started to screw up the system, which was not designed, because they never had this kind of nonsense weather, right? So which meant that the system was not designed to deal with the fact that there was no water in the system. And then when the water did come, it flooded. So there was so much water that the whole system just failed. And eventually it just meant that people didn't have drinking water. So guess what? They left. So this was one of the reasons. There were many other reasons, but basically weird, totally crazy climate behavior is one of the reasons why Angkor Wat has collapsed. among other things, right? So which we are also seeing in everywhere. Now in 536 AD, so we go back 2 cycles before that. So this was in the 6th century. And I was very shocked to see this because I thought I was very smart and I know a lot about history, and I did not know this. That in the year 536, the world went dark. And basically, they had 2 years of winter. Okay, so like, let that sink in, guys. 2 years of winter. No spring, no summer, no autumn. 2 years of winter and it was very weird because in those days, they had no internet. So basically, what happens in one place, the people from far away, they had no idea what just happened. And it meant that when they look at the sky, they couldn't understand why the sun went dark. And basically, they had perpetual darkness. So basically, it was nighttime for almost 2 years. And in case you are thinking that's not possible because the earth is turning, right? So here's what happened. Volcanic eruption is what a lot of the experts are saying. And of course, you might be thinking, but we have volcanic eruption during the earth era. Yeah, you ain't seen a volcanic eruption like this. It's the kind where the volcano blasted itself, like completely gone. One of these volcanoes was thought to be Krakatoa, which is in Indonesia, but there are a couple of others. And what experts thought was that there were a few major, crazy, insane, out of this world volcanic eruptions that were so big that it filled the world with volcanic ash all over the atmosphere until it spread around the entire atmosphere, and it blocked out the sun, right? So this is a total eclipse of the sun, and it was so much of it that it lasted for more than a year, 18 months to 2 years, depending on where you were. And for many of the people, when they look at the sky and the sun disappeared, of course, then they were very religious, right? And then they thought that basically the world has ended. God is angry with you. And then depending on what religion you were, they all thought the world was going to end. It probably kind of did because it messed with the rainwater system. When there's so much volcanic ash in the air, there was no evaporation, so the rain didn't come. And there was no drought. There was drought for many years. And it meant that the food wasn't growing. And of course, the people starved. Right? And then eventually, when the rains did come, so I start to see a bit of a pattern here that in multiple different cycles, there are some similarities here. So at first it's drought, there's no food. And then when the rain comes, you'll find that the lands don't have things growing on them because even all the natural trees and flowers all died already. And it meant that when the water came, there was nothing to soak up the water. So that's what plants do, right? And when there's nothing to soak up the water, the floods came. And basically the flood just came and washed away like a bunch of stuff, right? So nice story, right? So and this is the truth. Right. So basically, if you go and check the history books, whether you are in China or you're in Persia, or if you are like somewhere in that's recorded in the Americas, everybody said in the year 536, the sun went up. And nobody understood why, because they didn't have meteorologists in those days, right? So climate disasters, people. So yeah, so this is the two cycles ago, and that was 536 when the world went dark. And it lasted for about 2 years. My understanding is that there was a series of volcanic eruptions. So depending on where you were in the world, it was between 536 to 541. So there was a period of about 4 to 5 years where different parts of the world had the whole volcanic thing pretty bad. And it just spread all over the place. So it lasted for a very long time. Okay. So do your research. I didn't make this up, right? So now next is that the theme number 4 is that now these people were very smart. You have to understand that we came from the earth era. So basically the people in the air era were very well educated, just like us, right? And it meant that they were very smart to go and look at things. And so that means, was there innovation and tech? Yes, there was. Amazing innovation and tech, and on top of that, it's super cool. So of course, our equivalent is what? AI, right? I mean, it's like seriously, it's super cool. You talk about blockchain. I mean, human never come out with this kind of thing before, right? And you talk about like space technology, some of the insane things that we're doing in the world. I mean, no humans done that before, right? And the funny thing is, in the past, you'll be surprised. These people really smart, and but the problem is that none of these inventions actually increased productivity, nor did it create jobs. So and that's kind of the problem that we are seeing right now. I mean, like space is cool, but I'm not really sure anybody here got a job because we are exploring space. I'm not sure. So far, don't have, right? Maybe 2 people, but not like 200,000 people, right? And AI, I don't know. I mean, we're excited about AI, and they said that they will produce jobs. History doesn't prove it. History doesn't prove it. more likely to take away jobs actually, right? And also blockchain, we all got so excited about it, right? So apart from the people who keep asking you to buy Bitcoin because you earn more money out of it, Earth era stuff, how many jobs has Bitcoin and blockchain created? Anyone here got a job because, you know, like a legit air era job because blockchain? Haven't seen it, right? So what you see on this picture here is a compass, and it was an invention from the Chinese dynasty at the time. So after the Song dynasty, so even in the Yuan dynasty, the Mongolians were actually still pretty smart people. In fact, they have to be quite smart to basically on horseback, they conquered almost the whole known world. So they're pretty smart people. And this is an actual working compass. It looks like a spoon on a thing. I thought it was quite cute, but it's a working compass, and Chinese people are really smart. Okay. Now, what you see on this picture on the right hand side is a very famous astronomical clock that is right now still standing in Europe. And this was a bit later. It was later in the air era. It came out somewhere in the 1400s, but still an air era invention. And then you'll see on the left-hand side, this thing is called an astrolabe. And it's a mechanical device that allows an astrologer to be able to plot the exact calculation of where the planets are. And it's a really handy thing to have in your hand if the king asks you a question and you just sort of like, you know, do your little thing and you can basically do your predictions with a little astrolabe in your hand, which is quite a nice handy thing for someone like me to have, right? And also what you see in this picture here is now this particular one is later. Okay, so this thing, I'm not going to pretend that this thing was from the air era. It's done later. This was a bit about 100 years later than the air era, but this picture is from China actually. So this is actually an astronomical observatory. So it was and during the Yuan dynasty, there are historical records of 27 of such similar observatories that were scattered all over China, because then the astronomers, they were studying the positions of the planets and the meteors and comets and things like that. And you'd be surprised that a lot of these non-digital instruments might actually measure things a lot more accurately than the digital instruments that we have today. So in fact, so this is pretty cool. Like in China, the Mongolians had 27 of these things all over China, which I think is pretty cool, right? So on the left hand, what you see here is actually a gimbal. So what we think is a modern invention when you hold up your selfie stick or whatever, right? It's like the gimbal is not your invention. It actually came up of more than 2,000-3,000 years ago. The Greeks invented the gimbal. And it's like, and this thing actually is incorporated into an ink pot. So if you're going to use ink, and that thing essentially ensures that your ink will never spill out of it. And this is even more stable than if you had a normal ink pot, because in normal ink pot you can spill, right? This thing doesn't spill because it's a gimbal, right? And it's like, Greek people are very smart, right? So they came up with that. Of course, what you see in this picture is a reproduction. This is not a 2,000-year-old thing, okay? Now on the right-hand side, that very old thing, that thing genuinely is a few thousand years old. So this thing is okay, I'm not going to pronounce this right, okay? So it's a Greek word, but it's a Enki-Tyra or something like that, okay? Now this thing is known as the world's oldest analog computer. The Greeks had a computer, and it's analog, it's not digital, obviously. And it has gigantic gears that, and there are many pieces of it, because by the time they found it, it was in pieces already. So I think there are about 6 pieces, discernible pieces. And if you were to assemble them together, and scientists have already gone and done reproductions, you can find this on the internet. I'm not lying to you, right? So if you assemble it, and there's a hand crank where if you crank it, it actually shows you the exact position of stars, comets, planets in the sky. And they've somehow managed to do this. So again, it's a really nice instrument that shows up and they were studying these things. So I think you agree with me, all this is super cool. Like, I mean, you just don't think that humans can be so intelligent that without computers and GPS, they actually understand planets, stuff. And you think Elon Musk is so clever about things that are outer space, and we put men on the moon and we thought we were so smart. These guys did it without like a modern education, which I think is amazing. But the problem is that none of these things created jobs. None of these created jobs. I mean, it's really smart, and humans are like really out of this world intelligence, but it doesn't produce money. It doesn't create an industry for you to go make money, which is why interesting, isn't it? But yet And the other thing that I want to really question here is that, I mean, people clearly weren't starving enough to not have the free time to think about all these things, right? Like, let's pause here and think, okay? Humans got a lot of free time to sit around in corners and look into the sky and go, what's that planet? Why the planet is like that? How come when these two planets like that, what does it mean? They got time to do all these things, guys. So it tells you that they are not like, taking a hammer and like hammering something for 16 hours a day. They're not doing that. They have time to look at the sky, right? And it also means that they're not dying from hunger because they got time to look at the sky. So that means, so much as I know I'm not telling the world's greatest story, that's because you're looking at it through an Earth perspective. But if you really think about the logic behind it, it doesn't look like people are starving to death. But it also doesn't look like they're all busy out there in industries making money and traveling around and doing buying and selling and buying stocks, right? So it doesn't look like it. That's what I'm telling you. Now, did they actually make things? Well, they did, but it's a bit unfortunate. Oh yes, I forgot about Fibonacci. So that's something that they invented too, very intelligent. He discovered the golden ratio. So if you're familiar with mathematics and Fibonacci number, really cool, didn't create any jobs, right? This wasn't like P&L. This was just cool, like nature, right? And so they did make things. And maybe if you care about productivity, you might like to know that the catapult was invented in the previous air era. It was very productive and efficient at killing more people. And the Chinese got involved too because they invented gunpowder. So basically you could make rockets and stuff, and then we could blast a lot of people and we could all die at the same time, right? So that's another thing that happens in air eras, that the only productivity in terms of making things that we were actually able to do was to make weapons that kill more people. And historically, in all the history records, these are the inventions that led to massive increases, exponential increases in more people dying from fights that this country don't like this country, so we find more ways to blast more people to death, right? So again, not the best observation, but then you also know I'm not lying to you, right? So we are getting very good at finding more biological, chemical, and nuclear ways to wipe out more people from Earth. But then again, remember I said that in the Earth era, we have an overpopulation problem. And it wasn't just us, the Song Dynasty and the Roman Empire had the same thing too. So maybe that's just the nature's way of like, writing the balance. I don't know. I mean, I'm just the astrologer, right? So okay, another theme here is that I went and studied the famous people. And I realized that history, one good thing about history is that when we look at who we remember, so of course there are all these millions of people and they all live and died, right? So no one cares about them. But there are a small group of people we actually care about. And in different periods of history, who has lived through history and we still talk about them today gives us a very good sense of what that period was about. Now, yesterday I talked about the fire era. And I mentioned names like Mozart, Beethoven, Shakespeare, Queen Elizabeth. And it's like the fact that I mentioned those things, it gives you this idea. Straight away, okay, the arts was important, that kings and queens were important, storytelling, and it's like religion, for example, or discovering things, getting on a ship and going around. Now, those were important. That's fire era. So that means when we look into our era, so I don't know, but I think in about 100, 200 years time, when our descendants look back at us, they're going to go, oh my God, Elon Musk. Oh my God, like Jeff Bezos, right? And OMG, like Mark Zuckerberg. So that tells you something about us, right? So whose names go down in history gives us a pretty good sense of what those people cared about. Notice a lot of our scientists, they're not going to go down in history, but Elon Musk will. Right? I mean, we know this, right? So that's why when I went back, one of the things I looked for is who were the famous people that I could find from the Yuan dynasty period, or the period that was after the fall of the Roman Empire, and also around the time where the Greek democracy started to like basically, die down. So, and the interesting thing is I did find famous people, but they're not who you expect. Okay, so the only famous people, and there are not a lot of them, for an air era that is supposed to be about thinking and communication, we don't have a lot of records, which is really sad. But what we remember from past eras, there are only two types of people. I can guarantee you can go and search. If you want to find, look for 5th and 6th century. Look for late 11th and 12th century and early 13th century. Look for 5th and 6th century BC. You can go through that. Okay, you go and type and look for famous people, cannot find one. Okay, there are only two types of people. One, they are either a military revolutionary, means you don't like the previous government and then you're the barbarian and went and like burn them down, or you are an influencer or a content creator. So I mean, if you are Instagrammer or YouTuber, good news for you lah. Okay, so let me show you who these people are. Okay, now this is the first group of people. They are the barbarians lah. So you got Genghis Khan, you have his grandson Kublai Khan, you also have Attila the Hun. So that's an Asian person who rode his horse all the way until Rome and sacked Rome. Okay, so that's how powerful Asia can be in the era. And the last group is not one person. It is a group of people famously known as the Crusaders. And I don't know how much you know about the Crusaders, but it's a series of wars that was fought between a lot of like people from the Christian nations who went to the Holy Lands, where we are having some fighting now, where quite frankly, for centuries now, the Christians and the Muslims and the Jews and everybody else in between are just fighting for Holy Land. And that war, the Crusades apparently went on for like a couple of 100 years, but quite frankly, I think they are still fighting the Crusade lah. So then it's just a never-ending fight, right? So there's this group of people, the military revolutionaries, and there are more peaceful people. Don't worry. So this group of people, let me tell you who they are. The first group is an astronomer and his name is Guo Shoujing. And he was one of the primary astronomers at the time, and he served the king at the time. You also got Su Song, and Su Song is the inventor of the astronomical clock in China, and that's him standing. His statue is featured like in China right next to his invention. And I really have to say, sometimes it's very interesting how old professions sometimes come back into fashion, right? Just thinking it's interesting. A lot of young people are interested in astrology nowadays. Okay, but anyway, and you also get Fibonacci. So that's the guy there. Now on the bottom right hand corner, we get more mathematicians, and not just Fibonacci. On the right hand corner, you have Archimedes. Right, so that's the Eureka guy, and he came up with a lot of the mathematical thoughts that contributed to us today. The guy on the left hand side, that's Marco Polo. Okay, so that's the guy from Venice, right, who basically traveled across the Silk Road, went to China, and then there was this exchange of cultures. So there was still trade. So don't get me wrong, it wasn't like basically trade died, because otherwise Marco Polo wouldn't be there. But it's not the same level of trade as what you got with the Earth era. So that still is trade. Don't worry, okay? We're not all going to die and like stay in corners. But Marco Polo is most known for the records that he kept, and he wrote it all in a record, which is why we still read the adventures of Marco Polo today. And obviously, right at the very bottom, our grand triumvirate of the grand thinkers of Greek democracy, you get your Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle. So they all were operating in the high level of the height of Greek classical thought. So basically, that's all the famous people I was able to find. That's it. So here's what I didn't find. I couldn't find a single king whose name I recognize. So there were kings, right? But they are all like pointless, and like no one remembers them. And were there rich people? Of course there were rich people. No one remembers them. So basically not important whether you're rich, whether you're king. It's just not the most important thing. During at the time, even up to now, the only people we bother remembering are either military revolutionaries or thinkers. And you can verify that if you want to. So this adds on to the fact that it's not that the priorities of people are different. So what we care about are people who are the thinkers, who are trying to reach into human knowledge, which is why a lot of people are saying that, okay, AI is going to be huge. I don't think you needed to come here to know that, right? So AI is going to be huge, robotics is going to be huge, and every time there's a breakthrough, it's like, oh my God, you mean humans are capable of doing that? Well, that's what these guys were doing, right? The mathematicians, and you know what I'm saying, right? Okay, which is why I'm going to add on here. Okay, so my last section here is what I promised all of you I would do. That these are the 7 industries that I think will be huge. And this is building off what I had observed, not just in the previous era. So some of it is a logic, right? So that means I'm looking for the analogies or the common comparisons that we have in today's world. But also, I think that there were a few things that is very, very clear that's happening in our world right now that has never happened, as far as I can see, from the previous generations. So we have some unique problems where I think, unfortunately, I don't think history can help us. So we kind of need to come up with our own solutions, okay? So there are a few things that I'm going to mention, okay? Because, like I said, if you look at my this section from the eyes of an Earth era person, if you wear the glasses and all you can see is Earth era considerations, I guarantee you're going to call me a doomer. So if that's going to be the case, then okay lah. I mean, I do this for free and then I just put myself out to be a doomer, right? But the truth here is that I want to really appeal to the fact that rather than calling this a doomer, and even if let's just say we accept, okay, fine, we are doomers, right? So that if we say that there's going to be a doom, then okay, then we have some work to do lah, right? So then at least we can start looking at real solutions. And this is why I kind of assembled like a series of 10 facts. And these are facts, like they're unrefutable facts that we are facing right now in the last few years, and definitely will not disappear in the next few years. Real hard facts. And I think we need to look at these hard truths. And because if we don't accept these 10 truths that we are facing right now, given the forecast that I just given and what we know about history, then we can just go to a corner and see no evil and hear no evil. Like maybe you can drug yourself into oblivion, right? But here are the 10 facts. Okay, so without further ado, number one is that the sea level will rise. And I was in Venice just 3 months ago. I saw for myself that I saw the building across from my Airbnb. I saw the water go in, and the water was entering into the main hall. It was ridiculous. Right? I literally, because it was raining, I literally saw the sea level rise. Like I was standing there with my mom and going like, oh my god, this is not even funny. So the sea level will rise. Okay, lots of places are going to disappear. Number two, global temperatures will increase. I mean, you cannot feel it, right? So no one's going to argue with this, right? It's happening. Now, number three, please stop asking me whether there will be war. The war already started. So no need to ask me already. There's already war, right? Okay, so war have already started. They are not going to disappear. Okay. Now, also, that there is no one in charge now. Name me a person who is a leader of the world right now. I don't know. The only people you can name that are all in their 80s lah, and they no confirm win election, right? So what, right? And also another one is that reproduction worldwide, especially in the advanced countries, are below replacement rate. It is to the extent that the human population will whittle down, because mathematically there's no other way to look at it, right? Now, the next one is that obviously then the world is aging. So we're going to have a whole ton of old people. And right now it's a gigantic problem for every country in the world. They have no idea what they're going to do when there's a whole bunch of old people who are sick and dying, and then nobody's actually doing the work. Sorry, that's the truth, right? And number 7 is that technology will show up. And if history is to be believed, and the tech people to not be believed, is that it will replace a lot of jobs. Truth, right? Automation is here. I'm not sure if you guys know this, but in America, there are many industries where they're on strike now. So the script writers, a lot of the actors, people who make TV shows and movies, they're all on strike now. They're not producing more programs. And from what I've heard, I'm a gamer, by the way. So even the gaming industry, people are on strike now. So they say AI is taking over our jobs, so they're on strike. I'm not really sure what that's going to do, right? And also degrees have already stopped getting jobs for young people. It's a fact. And the numbers don't make sense anymore. And therefore, the next one is also that young people will not be able to afford, and then you fill in the blank. So you can start off with properties. You can add on other things as you go along. Like you can just make the list longer and longer, right? So the next generation is not going to be able to afford a ton of stuff, right? Which we buy without thinking nowadays. So fact, okay? And the last one is that if we want to be honest, there are lots of systems of the world are going kaput, right? So that means if you're expecting the UN to solve a problem, anyone seen a UN solve problem anytime recently, right? Anyone seen World Bank solve problems recently? Anyone seen, I don't know, like COP27 solve any problem recently? I don't know, right? So bank systems are also not really working anymore, right? So the thing is, here are the hard truths. Okay, so if we don't accept any of this, sure, we can argue until your face is blue, but all these are facts, right? And history. Okay, so now once we accept this, then we can start to look at how to approach this. And I spent so much time thinking about this, right? So one way is our Earth era way, which is that we look at numbers and we say, oh shit, man, this thing doesn't work, right? Our system is broken. And that means what we usually do is that we need to fix it. And guys, you all remember, right? So when the reproduction rate went down, then every country had baby bonus. You all remember that, right? So started with Singapore and a few others, then they all start copying each other. Didn't work, right? Didn't work anywhere. And then they said, oh, temperature rising. So then let's go and cut like emissions and whatever. Yeah, tell me which country managed to do it, right? So the thing is, we can go with that. But then you see, it creates what, if you look around you, it creates this sense of despondence. If you ask me which is the doomer mindset now, this is the doomer mindset. Where you try and solve something and then you try and then it doesn't work, right? And then so you sort of realize that then maybe if you try and solve it and it doesn't work and then we stop trying to solve it. So is that doomer mentality? Stick with me, guys, right? So don't get angry with me first. Okay, so basically I'm suggesting that this approach a bit stupid already. Right, and it's like if anyone still thinks that you want to go and solve this problem, I think we are quite idiotic. For people who are so educated, it don't make sense, right? And therefore, so let me show you this series of graphs, which I thought was very illuminating, and I think it describes our issue. So first of all, here is the facts of the matter. Okay, pollution is up, and it has been up for the last few decades. And the other thing, the good news is that along with the pollution, the good news is that as an Earth era, we have been very productive. So our industrial output has been up, which is why the whole world is so rich right now, right? Everybody got money. We are all like super wealthy. But also at the same time, here are the real facts, is that the population has started dropping. So if we extend the numbers out, and population is very easy for us to predict, because the truth is that you cannot change the situation, right? So whoever is alive now is alive now, right? So so the demographers can already tell you what the numbers will be, barring war, barring famine, and it means we assume that all these people don't die in like mass, right? Even if we live life as per normal, the population is dropping worldwide. And this also means that as we have less people out there doing stuff, and it also means that our food production will fall. And the demographers is a correlation thing. We cannot change this number. Now, the other thing here is that because the population is down and because the food supply is down, therefore industrial output will go down. Logic, isn't it? So, and I got all these diagrams from think tanks and economists and demographers that are looking at facts and numbers, right? So, era, right? So, and then on top of that, you add in another irrefutable number, which is that our resources are dwindling. So that means, and that's going down real fast. So basically, your fossil fuels, your coal, and I don't know, like fruits and space and fish and whatever. Basically, the fish is like dying already. We eat so many until the fish die already, right? So the thing is, so the amount of resources you cannot change this in the foreseeable future. Nobody has the answer to this, right? And that means, okay, so here's the ultimate doomer sentence. Okay, so this diagram that you see here is what we call population collapse, civilization collapse. Okay, so and the thing is, I know it sounds terrible, but the thing is, these are numbers, and if you talk to any expert, there's very few people who have the guts to go and challenge all these numbers, right? You have to be very idiotic to challenge these numbers. So guys, this is the scenario that we're dealing with. Okay, all good, yeah? Don't get angry with me, I didn't cause the problem. Okay, so now if we look at all these hard truths, right? The thing is, notice that if you try to be in a problem-solving method, like I said, none of these can be solved, right? You look at number 3. We had one war, haven't even solved that war yet, we got another one already. So it's like, anyone thinks that we might be able to solve the Ukraine hotspot and the Israel hotspot before the China one starts. I don't really have a lot of faith that that's going to happen. Right? And that means anyone thinks that after the next US election, we're going to have a world leader. I definitely do not think that will happen, right? So, and the reproduction rate isn't going to change. Ask any millennial and Gen Z, nobody is thinking about having 7 children now, right? So these are facts. And that means that as we start to go and really open our eyes and start looking at things around here. Now, this is an article I found from the National Geographic, and it's a picture of the Arctic tundra. And just so you know what a tundra is, it's not supposed to be this color, by the way. So the tundra is supposed to be white color with things that are other colors, but it's not green color, right? So the thing is, basically, the earth warming thing, much as some places become uninhabitable. But this also means that some places, which have never been habitable before, will now be habitable. So give it another, 2-3 years, look, guys, we can grow crops in the tundra. Right? I mean, it's like, come on, look at the picture. This is from National Geo. Nobody is messing with pictures here. This is National Geographic. Okay, so And that's why I'm suggesting a very, very radical thinking. And it's something that I've been studying, like the Aristotles, the Socrates, and the thinkers who have managed to shift people in mindset. Not fully, but we try our best, right? So instead of thinking that the system is broken and that we need to try and fix it, stop blaming the government and everything else. Basically, that's how we get angry. And then we go on the streets and then we shout and scream, and not that that's helping anything, right? Luckily, we are not allowed to do that in Singapore. So the other thing here is that the system, if we admit to ourselves, the system is functioning exactly as it was intended. Right? So, I mean, if you design it such that you only reward people in a financial way for things, then everybody's just going to go to where there's a lot of money, and nobody is going to go and do things where there's no money. Right? So the system is not broken. The system is functioning the way it was designed. Come on, right? Which is why we all follow like lemmings and sheep, right? So the thing is, that means that if you want a change, that means we can no longer do the old way. We simply have to find a new solution. And the pictures that you see here is how we move from fire to earth. Okay, so going on to the next bit here is that now, if we are basically saying that this is broken, and especially if you start to outsource this to other people who might be able to get the answer, this picture, I thought I was quite worried when I saw it, because it is basically people numbing themselves. And if you think about, and I'm an astrologer, my day job, I professionally listen to people's problems, just so you all know, right? And it just means that people's number one issue is that they're just jaded with life, and then you know what they do with their time? When they're not working, then they just Netflix, or they play mobile games, or they just sink themselves into some kind of addiction, mobile addiction or digital addiction or another, and that's us, right? So this I think is the real doomer mindset, right? Because then we are just waiting for the whole thing to collapse, and I don't think that makes sense. Now, let me show you something that's a lot more optimistic. Now, this picture, I got it from a group of people in Amsterdam. And what you see here is a bunch of little houses that are located on the water. Now, not because they're trying to be cool, not because they are millennials who are like, trying to be like Instagram cool, right? But because Amsterdam is slated to disappear under the water. And it's like the sea level will rise. And what you have here is a group of engineers. Basically, these are not built by your normal people. These are very well-trained, well-educated people who have started to study, well, what if instead of like basically scolding the government, like, why y'all never reduce the carbon emissions? Hey guys, that's not going to work. It hasn't worked and will never work, right? So they've basically accepted the sea level will rise. So we accepted the doomer mindset, right? And which means that they got together and said, okay, guys, we are screwed. So let's go find a way out of this. So these engineers started to build houses. Now, these are experimental. The reason why all the houses look different is because they are playing with different systems. So they're looking at how to incorporate systems that make seawater drinkable, because you're going to be surrounded by the sea, hello, right? And then you're also going to look at things like sewage systems. What if all of us flushing our toilet, then all our shit go into the sea, then how are we going to survive? There's going to be a stupid sewer, right? So the thing is, how can we solve all these things? And basically, problem after problem after problem, and then they basically sit down and tackle them one by one. Okay, so now at this point, what I'm trying to show you here is that the doomer mindset is not this mindset. The doomer mindset is when you don't do anything, right? And basically the right way here is that when we realize that the transition from earth to air means that we're going to have a host of problems, you either accept it or you don't, right? And that means, now here, let me give you an example of how this mindset change is so what a paradigm shift. Okay, now I want you to imagine that you are a civil engineer or you are an architect, and you graduated at the top of your class. You are genuinely talented. Now, if you look at a project like this, tell me, what is the ROI of this? Tell me who is paying for this project. Nobody. Because the thing is, there's no guarantee that these things will work. They are all experimenting because they don't know. Nobody built houses like this before, right? And that means that they have to prepare not just for the fact that the water is coming, but that the water will keep rising. So that means it is not a permanent structure. You understand that these are houses that are designed to float onto the water. And these are houses that are designed to actually move around. You can actually detach your house, and your house can drive one. You can drive your house to another place and lock on to another place. And how do we deal with the international problems, right? When we can no longer draw international boundaries, can you drive your house to another country and then they will not shoot you because you are a refugee, right? So the thing here is that they started looking at all these problems. It's ridiculous. Now, if you are a talented civil engineer, let me tell you that if you choose to be on this project, here's what's going to happen. Your mother thinks you're insane because you spend so much money on your education and you work on this project where you earn nothing. Right? And then they will tell you, why don't you just, you're architect, right? Go and work for a property developer. After all, there's new developments there. Right? Everybody wants to buy a property that's going to rise in prices and they're paying millions of dollars. Now you should go and work for a property developer. Why work for this ridiculous, stupid company, right? And therefore, guess why? No engineers are working on this because everybody wants an ROI on the money and the hours and the time and the years that you spend getting a degree. So nobody's going to do this. Come on, right? So, and on top of that, it's like, and if you think about it, there's cost involved, you know. Like you see all these materials, they cost money, just so you know. Somebody's got to pay for this. Guess who's paying for it? Well, nobody, right? Which is why these people are having so much trouble moving the technology along. And then when you want to invest in it, imagine now you've got 100,000 of your money and they ask you for an investment. And then you ask him, hey bro, tell me honestly, what's the ROI on my investment? And they tell you, honestly, nothing. I'm just going to take your 100K and I'll buy a lot of these, like, we are going to experiment with a wide range of materials because honestly, we don't know what's going to work. And the thing is, and then the investor will go like, okay, so what's the timeline here? Like, you know, at what point do you think I can start getting my money back? And then if the engineer was being honest with you, you're thinking about the demand and supply, right? At this moment, nobody wants to buy a house like this. You know why? Because there are a lot of problems with it. The flush doesn't work. The solar panel is broken half the time because they are still experimenting with it. Nobody is going to pay for a house like this. Agree? So the demand for this kind of house is like zero. No one's stupid enough to live in a house like this. But the thing is, let's just say there is a moment in time where the demand for this house is super high. Guess when that's going to happen? That's when the tsunami comes, right? And then your house doesn't operate anymore. And oh my God, there are all these floating houses. And that's when everybody will sell the bloody shirt off their back to get your family into one of these houses because that's your only chance of survival, isn't it? Now that's when the demand will come. Oh my God, you'll be a billionaire at that time. But you see, the problem is when the demand comes, your money is now worthless, right? So the thing is basically what you have here are a group of industries. That's why I warn you all, my 7 industries, I can tell you all will make money on. So if you are thinking about how we're going to make any money out of this, it's going to be like this. So the thing is, who is going to potentially save the people of Amsterdam is this group of engineers here who are taking their time, money, and knowledge, and they're actually going and taking a problem and actually solving it. Now, what then needs to happen in order for this project to actually have a fighting chance of survival? It is that when you have regular people or even companies who say that, you know what, we've got this gigantic surplus. Now, instead of buying a stock in the stock market that is expected to earn you how many percent in the stock market, is it a crazy idea that you actually give it to these people? And you know what? These guys, here's what they're not going to do. They're not going to book themselves into a skiing trip in Aspen because that's not what these guys did. Now, if these guys are the kind of money people who will take your money and go and bomb it on a ski lodge somewhere in Switzerland, right? I tell you, they wouldn't have been on this project in the first place. They would have gone and worked for ExxonMobil, right? Because these guys are the number one in their college. Why work on this stupid project? So basically, I'm saying that there is a very small, tiny group of people who have already shifted into the air era. Now, however, the fact is the world still operates this way, and it means that resources are required. And it means that the average smart person needs to start thinking to yourself, who are the people who are trying to scrape money off you so that they can buy a ski lodge in Switzerland? And who are the people who are trying their best to put in their own resources to try and make sure that you people survive? You know what I'm saying? So the thing is, as you look at this entire story here, it means that if society is going to have a bit of a nicer story from the fall of the Roman Empire and the fall of the Song Dynasty Empire, we kind of have to reallocate. Not just your money, but also things like your time and your effort. It means that if you're an engineer, it's choosing this project over ExxonMobil. It's choosing potentially, basically eating very simple things, not going for holidays 3 times a year, over a company that's going to pay you a 13-month bonus, right? And the thing is, how many people do you think are going to make that choice? And because, like what happened in the Roman Empire, everybody chose ExxonMobil, which is why when it shows up, nothing is prepared. And so people are going to suffer and people are going to have a really, really bad time. And the stupid thing is, this is the richest and the most educated people ever on earth. And the tsunami is coming and no one gives a fuck, right? So this is why nothing is going to change, right? So, and this is why, as I show you my 7 industries, it's coming from a bit of a different space. Okay, so let me show you what are the parameters of these 7 industries. Number 1 is that the purpose of me showing you these 7 is like, please don't come from a perspective of, oh shit, this is a problem, we have to stop it, or we have to solve it. I already said this is not solvable, right? There is no solution. You just have to be like the Amsterdam engineer and realize that this is a screw up situation. We just have to deal with it, right? So that means I would rather you think of it as a redefinition. So that means instead of saying that our city is going to sink, then you redefine it and say we have to find a new way to live. Right? So that means it's not being upset because you have to move out from your house, but to realize that you're moving to a new house and your new house has no sewage and no electricity. So please go and do what's necessary to make your new house available. Does that make sense, guys? Right? So, and it means you have to pay with no ROI. And it takes your time, money, and effort because you kind of have to set up the new place that you're moving into, which is why moving house costs money, right, guys? And most of the time, we don't see it as a problem because you think that your new property is going to make you money in 20 years' time. Okay, so now another thing is that if you look at the forces of demand and supply, in fact, it will still work. So that's the good thing. If we go back to the original theory of demand and supply, it means that the professions, if you are very scared that you're not going to have a job, let me tell you, all these 7 industries, I guarantee you have job. Confirm you have job, and it's all purposeful job, guaranteed, right? That because there's a very high demand. Society requires this. Look at the house on the water, right? You telling me so Amsterdam doesn't demand those houses? You are joking. We need those houses so badly, right? And there's a very low supply because 1 out of 1,000 engineers are willing to work on that project. Everyone else goes to ExxonMobil, right? So there's a very low supply, which guarantees you confirm got job. Okay. Now the next thing is that in the air era, the industries that we see will be of necessity. Okay, so that means even if you watch a lot of the science fiction movies and stuff, right, when people develop technologies, it's because, well, there's a problem, right, which is why we kind of have to develop this real quick so that people can survive, right? So that means it's not a market of exchange. Can I repeat? That it is a market of necessity and not of exchange. So that means it's a reallocation of our engineers to go and solve the floating house problem and not burning more fossil fuels. I can tell you the whole thing can be automated very easily. You don't need all these people there trying to make the fossil fuel company more money. Right? You get more money for working for them, but it's not. I can tell you that's the kind of companies where they end up being in my class telling me they're depressed because their work is purposeless. Right? Another weird thing is that if you go and look at that project in Amsterdam is a real project. And if you actually go online and watch videos, so they're making a lot of internet videos to educate more people and hopefully to have more people allocate more resources to their project because they're trying to save your ass, right? And so the thing is, when you go and look at all these people, the funny thing is they're not, let me tell you what they are not, right? They're not depressed. They are not at home drowning themselves in Netflix. In fact, they earn way less than you, but I tell you, they're all smiling. And there are people of different nationalities, different colors. Nobody is complaining about race and religion. Everybody is trying to find a way to work together. And I tell you, that should be what the air era should be like. While everybody is just looking for the make money quick and they're all depressed and they're all watching Netflix, right? So just saying. Now, if you look at this concept of when you look at all these industries, now I know that most of you are thinking like, okay, where can I go to apply for this job? There won't be a job for you to apply for because number 1, jobs is not an air era thing. None of those engineers working on the project think of it as a job. They're all in it as like it's like a social enterprise. People have gone there. In fact, many of these guys have taken their own money because nobody is willing to give them money. They took their own money to fund all these things, to find a solution for everyone else, right? And so that means it's like think of it as a way of providing like a service. And that means that you don't always have to be the person to do the actual job. It means that you find different ways to get involved to solve this problem. So much as the people who are working on the homes, but there are also people who are not engineers and they're trying to find a way to, can we link up with other countries so that if we have to transport these floating houses to your water space, can we work out an international agreement so that you're not going to shoot my people when we show up, right? So basically, you don't have to be an engineer to get involved in that project. Find your own way of getting involved in the project. Think of yourself as providing a service and the demand will be there. And that means the society has to find a way to reallocate resources so that these guys are getting what they need to solve everybody's problem. Okay. And we also get another thing is like, please don't wait. you kind of have to act now because the air era already started. It's not coming, it's here, right? So the thing is, and a lot of people will be thinking like, okay, does that mean I have to make a career change right now? No, but if you have 6 hours, guys, you've already spent 6 hours listening to me. If you have 6 hours to spend on online in a Zoom webinar listening to me, you have 6 hours to go and spend on something useful and give your time and your resources to do something useful. You know what I'm saying? So don't tell me that there's no time. And don't tell me that there's no money. If you can go holiday 3 times a year, you got money, right? So, and there's a much better way than actually contributing to carbon things when you're flying in an aeroplane, right? So I'm also guilty. I just went to Europe, right? So now, so the thing is, the 7 industries that will be huge. Number 1 is the aging and the retirement crisis. Okay, so that's happening, and if you are in Asia, number 1 problem, right? There's lots and lots and millions of old people. They're all retiring, by the way, and a lot of them are going to be broke because a lot of the systems, the banking system, CPF system, EPF systems are already in trouble, right? So if you think that there's going to be a whole bunch of money to look after like a big group of them, there probably won't be. And that means that there has to be a way to deal with this in a very in a mass way. So that's a massive industry, huge demand, extremely low supply. Right, so you don't need to see my PowerPoint slide to know the statistics. There's going to be a whole bunch of old people. Okay, so don't need really. And for most of these countries, these are the Asian countries, we are already past the working population age peak. So it differs from different countries, but safe to say that basically now, there are going to be more old people than there are people working. And we can't change this. We can't solve this. There's no solution one. Okay, so you just got to accept it. And you'll find that aged care is an industry that has a chronic understaffing problem, not just in Singapore, every freaking country in the world, right? And why is it that the job sucks? Now, I want you to think about this. Why the job sucks is because, first of all, they are paid nonsense. It's like no resources are being moved there, which is ridiculous because that's a very huge portion of the human population. And the second thing is that they have excessive workloads because not enough people are doing it. So in order for people to have normal 8-hour work days, we kind of need to have more people in the industry. Yes, no? Right? So the reason why they're working 16-hour days is because nobody wants to do the job. So can you see how rationally this problem can be solved? We can make the job a lot more attractive if more people of expertise, if you're from the medical industry, if you're from the housing industry, if you are from anybody who's very good at administration and manpower allocation, HR, go there. Go there, right? They're not going to pay you a 13-month bonus, but there's a chance that you might be rich enough to be okay even if you don't have a 13-month bonus, because this problem is going to cause you a bigger problem in 10 years' time than not getting a 13-month bonus, right? And also, the thing is, because the industry is in a downward spiral, because the lesser people do it, the more the job sucks. And the more the job sucks, the lower the pay is, right? And that means we're looking at a shithole here, guys, right? And that means that nearly half of teenagers, in fact, honestly, I think the number is way higher. You tell me how many teenagers are interested in healthcare because the whole job sucks, right? And that means that the whole idea is think of a way to make this job sustainable, doable. It's not going to be like the world's best, most luxurious job. Let's be real here. But the thing is, there is a demand and we need people there. Okay, so that means the global care industry. So if you want to look at money, okay, let me tell you what the ROI is here. Okay, if you really must look at money, says at the bottom here, global elderly care services was evaluated at $1,100 billion last year, right? You want a piece of that? Start a business, start solving that problem, right? And it's slated to hit 1,800 billion. They don't even have a word for it, which is why they put 1,800 billion, right? By the end of 2030. So you're looking for emerging industry. This is it, guys. Right, so that means now, are you going to apply for a job somewhere? Here's what I actually suggest. If you apply for a job, the fact is the pay sucks right now, right? You know what I mean? The pay sucks, which is why nobody wants to do it. But the thing is, now consider, what if you get a bunch of people together and you provide a service? Now, I want you to consider, some of you not so young already. Yeah? Now, imagine if right now you're in your 50s and you got quite a bit of money in your bank account, and you know for a fact that you will be one of many, many, many old people, and there will be a shortage of people who will look after you when you're old. Fact, right? And the thing is, think about it. If you have a bit of money, you actually are willing, think about it, you probably are willing to spend quite a big chunk of all the money that you made when you were younger to at least make sure that when you're old, you're treated a bit nicer than most people. Everyone agree or not? Like you probably would, right? That's what you save up for your retirement for, isn't it? There's a lot of money there, guys, right? So what people want to see is like good service. Right, so get a bunch of smart people who with well educated, and you've been working in the rich industries, find a way to take care of lots and lots and lots of old people in a good way and charge reasonably. And I tell you, here's the weird thing. I know of a lot of people of my age and in their 40s who are struggling to look after their old folk. And if there was a workable solution, I've given this funny idea that people actually are willing to pay if there is an actual workable solution. Right now, even if you are willing to pay, there isn't a solution, right? So there's a huge hole in the market, go fill it. Right? Okay, so there we go. And the next industry that's going to be huge is the gender and the dating crisis. Right, so this is it's been coming up, right? Basically, people are no longer getting married. That almost 90% of the world's population are in a country that is a falling marriage rate. Now, is there anything wrong with people not getting married? Not really. But the thing is, that doesn't mean that there isn't other issues that come with it. So am I suggesting that we go and solve it? Let's force people to marry each other. It hasn't worked in China, hasn't worked in Singapore, hasn't worked in most places. So let's not try and solve it, right? But the thing is, the reality is lots and lots of people are not going to be married. They don't have a partner, they're going to get old and no one's there, right? So we got a problem, guys. And that means if you look at the statistics, and these numbers are not going to get better, they're only going to get worse, you understand, right? So in terms of the proportion of singles, you see that the below one, right, people who are in their 20s, who should be dating and you should be attending wedding dinners and stuff, right? But it's not happening, right? So these people are not getting into relationships. People in their 30s, look at that. People in the 30 to 34, like 40%, 30% are not married. So that's like almost half, 1/3 of these people are not married. 1 in 3 are not, right? So the thing is, there's no solution to this. You cannot force people to get married. You understand that, right? So you find that also there's a bit of a gender imbalance, that in fact there seems to be a larger number of men who are single. And the reason why this is so is not because all the women are lesbian, but also because women are marrying older men, or there are just different dynamics. You can go and study yourself. But the thing is, the difference in gender dynamics also means that there's also a loneliness epidemic. Right? And that means that there are other issues that will come up with it. And I don't think I need to educate you about what those things are. This is a fact. The numbers are there, right? And another thing that you start to realize is that as we start to redefine what relationships are, and it's like, even as you see that in a lot of countries, people are just complaining about how the women are earning a lot and they got high expectation. Now, I found this and I thought this was very interesting. In the US, it seems that more wives now out-earn their husbands. It is the numbers say so. And the funny thing is that the divorce rates are actually on a more positive side. That actually one of the big reasons that the divorce rate is actually falling in some of these countries is because here's the really weird thing. It happens to be a higher number when the woman out-earns the man. And this is not the story that we grew up with. But yet the numbers are telling an emerging story. Now, is this a feminist message? No, I'm just telling you the numbers say so. I don't really care either way, right? So the thing here is that actually what this means is, in the air era, the idea is to redefine. There's nothing wrong with a floating house. And there's nothing wrong with a couple that has decided to change the dynamics. But it means that there's more education that's required. The counseling and helping people to find the partners. There's a whole industry behind it. I think there's a lot of money there. There's a lot of single people and they are lonely and they want to find a partner, right? Can you all help? Like, do you have skills that might be able to help in the area? Like, raise your hand and get involved, right? So even a growing share of couples in Singapore have wives earning more than their husbands. So the thing is like, this is not a problem to be solved. It's a problem to be dealt with. You understand, right? So there's a lot of stuff to do here. Okay, and also you find that like we thought that technology was going to solve the problem, that if you got Tinder and like seriously just go online and start reading. Okay, Tinder causes more problems that young people don't even want to do Tinder anymore. So you find that the new generation, they are finding ways to redefine relationships. We need to find new ways for people to connect to each other, and to work out the dynamics of a relationship in new ways. So even if you talk about things like division of labor, you want to talk about like HR policies that allow women to work, men to not so work, and maybe there are lots of I'm just making this stuff up, right? So men need some support at home, maybe, for example, that women didn't traditionally need to have. Okay, can somebody go and supply those services? There's a huge market, by the way, guys. Right, so you want to make money, this is money, right? So if you stick on with your employee job, you may not survive as well as if you went into any of these industries in an entrepreneurial mindset, right? the third industry that I got on my list is the loneliness and depression. So this is not just single people with no partner. I'm talking in general. So like the people are having a real issue. So the most obvious ones are single households. And it's not just unmarried people. It is also old people who live very long. Then all their family members move out. Then their partner die. So then you basically get all these millions and millions and billions of people who are living by themselves. So they're occupying, first of all, they're occupying real estate. Okay, so that's one thing. I'm not blaming these people. I'm just saying it's a fact. They're occupying a unit. Sometimes one person stay in a very big house, for example, right? And then they get old, so they cannot take care of the house themselves, which is also a problem, right? So that means, is there a way to solve this thing? Is there a reallocation? Somebody has to go look at it, right? And maybe help, right? If you are educated and you're smart, don't go look for a 13-month bonus, help, right? And that means that if you are looking at, for example, single households, are there ways can we combine people? Can we create enclaves where people can support each other, right? If you get sick and then you just basically pass out at home, does anybody even know that you passed out at home? You know what I mean? And no friends. People don't have friends anymore. They are just going to work and then they are just working 16 hours a day. And there isn't a place for people to go. And this is a new concept that's come out in recent years, and it's called the third place. And it's called a third place because the first two places are your home and your workplace. And it's getting so that the average person doesn't actually have anywhere to go besides your home and your workplace. And it's like, where are the parks? Where even shopping malls, you just go there and take away, right? But you don't actually hang around there. There isn't a place for you to go and be part of a group, be part of a society, go get involved in something interesting, go play billiards or something. People don't do that anymore. So it's like, guys, can you help? Is there some kind of skill that you have? Can you create something, a space, a place for people to go so that people are still connecting with each other, so that if you pass out at home, someone actually knows, right? So, and why has this disappeared? Right? It used to be that people would go hang out at a club or something. Why do people not do that anymore? Right? So, and also you find that the businesses, if you want to talk about money, because I'm trying to convince you all so badly that I'll show you that there's money in this, right? That there is a mental wellness market. People are facing burnout. So you talk about bouldering gyms, people are going meditation. So these are the conventional ones. I'm in fact going further, that I think if you go to the gym or to a meditation studio, you don't always make friends. And that means that if we are trying to build like relationships, human relationships, maybe we need different types of activities. Maybe if you come together and share your knowledge and build like some floating houses, maybe people will actually make some friends. You know what I'm saying? That there's some kind of purpose, and you contribute to a community thing, that people are not so depressed and they're not committing suicide. Okay, so and now another big industry, huge industry, is the great redefinition of work. Because people hate their jobs, right? Look at this, right? People feel that they're pointless, meaningless jobs. And guys, people have been following me for a long time. Wow, this one is my favorite topic. So it's like my number one customer base are people who really hate their jobs, and they have no idea what they're doing when they go to work. They can't be bothered really. All they care about is the paycheck at the end of the month, right? And that means that it's because people know that we are capable of so much more. You want to show up somewhere and feel that you are changing something in the place. You know you are educated and you read enough newspapers to know all these problems that I mentioned so far, they're all real. And you are doing nothing to help any of these problems. And that's why we feel purposeless. And it's ridiculous. There's so much work to be done and no one's doing it, right? And so I'm suggesting that the kind of things that need to be done, like I said, is redefining work. And it means that work is not a place that you go, work is not a job that you apply for, and it's not a place that you go there and I give you 15 hours and you pay me at the end of the month, hopefully got 13-month bonus, right? That's a very old conversation. So what we are actually looking for now is a career redesign. And how do you get involved? I mean, you can do like what I'm doing, but you can also be people who go into existing industries and start questioning. So you guys are in committees, you guys are in meetings. How come no one's mentioning these things? Talk louder. Maybe you talk too soft, or you can't be bothered to say anything, which is why no one gives a shit, right? So basically, we need to identify causes and outcomes that we actually believe in. So identify the problems and say, okay, I would like to volunteer to solve this problem. Who's with me and who would like to form a committee? I think you'd be surprised that if you put your time and your money out for free, funnily enough, I suspect there are some people who say, you know what, you're doing it, I join you. Saturday, right? Let's meet on Saturday. Let's go and do this, right? We just need someone to start, not apply for a job. Start. right? And also to pinpoint target communities that we want to impact. So who is it? Is it old people? Is it poor people? Is it women? Is it men with lots of children at home? Find something, right? Define a lot of your professional and your personal skills. You are super educated and you've got skills in all sorts of things, right? So combine, like kind of figure out what you know, what you don't know, be clear about this, right? And also take stock of other strengths and resources. So that means not all your strengths are educational. So some people say, well, man, you can really talk and you talk for 6 hours. So guess what? That's my strength. I can talk for 6 hours and people are still listening, right? So that's my strength, sorry. So I'm using it. I'm using it, guys, right? I'm good at doing PowerPoint slides. My slides quite nice, right? My brother's slide also very nice, right? That's our strength. We're using it, guys, for free, right? And the thing is that, and because we're doing this, lots of people are interested to be part of this story. You know what I'm saying? Somebody has to start, right? And that means the resource that are available to you is not just money. Don't think about it as money. It's like maybe even the Sunday afternoon that you've got. Maybe you've got friends in Australia who have certain knowledge. Connect people, please. What does it take? An email, a WhatsApp, right? Calling people, let's meet on Zoom. It's like, can you do that, right? And also prioritize professionalism and purpose over pay. Now, this is the hardest, right? So that means that you can basically, between the floating house and the ExxonMobil, can you choose the floating house? Not to say that you are going to be broke. Most of us, frankly, are not going to get broke. And there is still ways to, of course, you have to do practical things, right? So you still need to have money. Somebody has to pay for that stuff. And it means that you got to work harder. You got to tell people, here's what we're doing, please support us, right? And I thought you might like to know that in the air era, that in fact, there are medieval guilds. So that's another theme that I didn't tell you all. I kept it until here to tell you, right? What is a guild? A guild is when people come together who have a certain amount of skills. So they band together. And in the days when there were no more schools, because basically Song Dynasty and Roman Empire died, so then basically all the universities disappeared, right? So how do we pass knowledge to each other? So that's when you get an apprenticeship program. The baker will teach the young baker how to bake. The blacksmith had to teach the young blacksmith. So they gathered together. And together they found ways to provide their services out to people. That's a bit like the Amsterdam floating house, isn't it? So that means we find ways to support each other, spread resources out, and then also to protect each other. So that means we make sure that the whole group of us are actually reasonably paid. Not millionaire pay, but that, look, I mean, we need 3 meals, right? We kind of have to pay for the internet, isn't it? Right? So this is where the guilds become very powerful. And think about it. This is the power of communities. And in the air era, these are the keywords that we're looking for. And I would like to say that in the past 3 cycles, humans not smart enough to use all those keywords. And I'm thinking, if people are smarter this time, let's not use the ugly words. And we got nicer air era words. Can we use the community stuff? Can we use the online stuff and the conversation stuff? Maybe that will create a better outcome than the previous air eras, you know? And now another one is keeping real skills alive. And this is the greatest irony, that despite this being the most educated that humans have ever been in history, but actually, when I teach my classes and I talk to people about redesigning their careers, let me tell you what's the most common thing I hear from people. They raise their hand and they tell me, May, I'm very highly paid now and I'm scared to leave my job. Because the truth is, when I look into the mirror, I realize I don't actually have any real skills. I have a master's degree, but I have no freaking idea what is going on out there. Apart from this current job, I'm not really sure I'm worth anything. You ask me to be an entrepreneur, a freelancer, and every time I think about being a freelancer, all I think is I'll probably be worth $500. Now that tells me you don't have real skills. You're only useful in an MNC, right? And if you are being paid $8,000 at MNC and if you start your own thing and you're not even worth $500, it tells you something, people, right? So that means, that's why I say it's so important to keep the real skills alive, right? So if you have real skills, you should not be worried that if you leave your job that you will starve to death. Think about it, right? If you are worried, it means you don't have real skills. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, let me show you something, okay? Now, when the Greeks and the Romans basically died off, right? And basically the empire was gone. Today, experts estimate that 90% of the amazing breakthroughs that Greeks and Romans had was lost forever during the Dark Ages. And the reason is because whatever we know today are just from a couple of libraries that were never looted by invaders. So when the barbarians came, they destroyed everything. And you know how everybody says it's not going to happen, like happen more than once already, more than once, and they're all very smart and intelligent people. By AD 700, only 1% of the people in Europe were literate. And maybe you tell me that this is impossible. It happened in China too, just so you know, right? So the thing is, you don't believe, right? And you think that no, but we're very smart, right? We got blockchain, everything is recorded. Well, think again, right? I don't know. Okay, so let me explain what I mean. Okay, I show you in real terms. What is a real skill? This is a real skill. This guy is a shoemaker. Now, let me tell you, when I was young and I walk around in the neighborhood, there's this old man who sit in a corner and he squat there and he and he makes shoes. He will fix your shoe. He's amazing, right? And he does it in like 10 minutes sometimes. Everyone remember that cobbler? And have you all realized that right now, name me somebody among your community who actually know how to make shoes. Now, everybody knows how to go to Amazon and Lazada at 11.11 sale to buy your latest Nike shoe. Nobody knows how to make them, right? And what happens when your supply chain is down? What happens when your internet is down and you can't buy anything on Amazon? What if the internet is down for 3 years? You're going to walk around without shoes, right? And the thing is, think about it. Nobody knows how to make shoes anymore, right? One generation, no one knows how to make shoes anymore. And that means that if the whole thing collapses, we're going to walk around barefoot, guys. So here's another thing. Go and learn how to make shoes. Trust me, you'll make a lot of money. Right? And if anyone here knows how to make shoes, can you go and start a class, please? And can you go online and say, guys, you all know how to make shoes? I know. Can you come and learn, please? You know what I mean? And let's look at this. What's this? Carpenter. We all know how to go and buy furniture. Anyone here knows how to chop down a tree? You know what? My grandfather was a carpenter. My grandfather's job was to push the wood through and cut the wood, right? And he was among the people who like wood cutter and the cutter. My grandfather did that. 2 generations later, I'm not sure me and my brother know the which end of the axe is the one that goes into the tree. Everyone knows what I'm talking about, right? We ain't got carpenters anymore. We all know how to buy shit online, but nobody knows how to do this. 1 generation is all it takes, guys, right? And another one, sewing machine. My grandmother used to fix my clothes. I got an aunt who used to make doll clothes for me. She's so super pro with the sewing machine. Guess what? I never bothered to learn from her. In about 25 years' time, she'll probably die, like all the baby boomers. And anyone here actually really know how to make clothes from a sewing machine? Or is it just easier to go on Zalora and Shein and buy it for $8, right? So what happens when Bangladesh doesn't want to supply you anymore, right? So think about it, guys. So if you know how to do this, set up a class, please. Keep this alive, right? Baking, not the stuff that you do in your kitchen, the stuff that makes bread for like a lot of people, right? So how many people know how to do this? Go and learn, right? And even things like that, we take it for granted, right? Just so you know, I used to work in construction and lots of people want to be the supervisor and the manager. Very few people know how to operate the crane, just saying, right? So if for whatever reason that all these people disappear, and you can complain all you want about foreigners, but one day, you're going to have to operate that thing, and guess what? You don't know how to do it. Right? So you've got all the expensive machines, don't know how to use it, which is the greatest irony. Please go and learn, right? So is this useful or not, guys? It's like, I know it sounds ridiculous, right? But that's how stupid like humans can become. You know, you think you're very educated, and I tell you, I studied the air era. People became stupid after the earth era ended. Okay, and simple things like chickens. My parents used to live on a kampong. They had chickens. I don't know which end of the chicken is the correct side. I can tell you that. I have no idea what the chicken coop looks like because I live in HDB, right? So the reality is go and learn. If someone knows, get involved, you know? So keep real skills alive. Even in my profession, I can tell, I was just talking with my marketing people, and nowadays it's so easy. You can just go and generate your astrology chart online. You know something? That most people actually don't even know what that circle thing is. They don't even know what they're looking at, right? And that means the calculation of a chart right from scratch is a very, very old skill. I can guarantee you, lots of people call themselves astrologers. 99% of them have no idea how a chart is actually being calculated. If there's no internet, straight away they can no longer do astrology. There are very few people who actually do know this stuff. And that means that if you look at in the olden days, guys, I know I'm past time, but this is really important. Please stick around, okay? And if you have in the air era, the most common system is not capitalism, because capitalism fails when the earth era fails. In the air era, the most common system is feudalism. And that means feudalism is based on rent. So that means if you are on a monarch, and the thing is, you basically have a vessel, somebody goes and is the lord of the manor, right? You're going to read medieval books, right? So basically what happens is that nobody who owns land, basically you have to go and pay rent. Whatever it is that the farmer produces, you give 40% to the guy up there. And you're supposed to do that in return for protection. Now, why do you need protection? Because there are barbarians around. There are people, what we call knights nowadays, is actually a gangster who has a weapon. Just so we are clear, right? So today we romanticize the knights, but the knight is simply a big strong man who has a weapon in his hand that you don't argue with because he has a weapon in his hand, right? So basically, what happens here is that the majority of people, now if you don't have a real skill, let me repeat this, if you don't have a real skill and the only thing you know how to do is to take your salary, your employee salary, and go online and start buying things at 11.11 sale, then here's what's probably going to happen, because this has happened in history, that you end up becoming the people right at the very bottom because you have no skills, right? And the thing is, the people who are the merchants, the farmers, the craftsmen, so if you can make swords, for example, guess what? The knights pay you. The knights don't want you in the fields because you know how to make swords, right? And that means that if you could now, I was joking with some people that I could just take my little instruments and 2 of my astrology books, even if there was no internet, I could go to a king and say, I'm pretty good at doing predictions, right? And I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be in the fields, right? So the thing is that at the very least, I'll get myself a meal and maybe a roof over my head, right? So the thing is, get real skills, guys. Right, and the thing is, that's super important. If you know how to make things, if you know how to make floating houses, you know the guy in the floating house, even if all the MNCs die, that guy still got job. You will give him everything you own just for a floating house. Think about it, guys. You need real skills, not a 13-month bonus. I don't know how to emphasize this enough. Okay, so now the next thing is that the number 6 is international friendships. So as I mentioned, the thing is, there are all this fighting going on. There's going to be plenty of wars. You won't run out of wars, I can tell you that. But none of us are actually fighting this war. Some of you listening to me are not even from my country. You're not even Chinese, right? So we are not the same people, but we don't have any problem with each other, right? We're happy to work with each other. So it's not us who are fighting with each other. There's those other people. And that means that that's so important for us to keep our international friendships alive. Whether or not you are in your home country, or if you are, let's just say if you are married to a foreigner, you've got, maybe your wife is from Myanmar. Let's make some friends here. Let's get to know each other's culture. This is not just about making money. This is not about going to Myanmar and starting a business there and try to scrape money off people. That's an Earth era conversation. Let's find out what people eat. Let's find out what their religion is and why you believe what you believe, and understand how people do stuff, right? So because we could lose that very quickly, guys. And the international friendships are what kept a lot of people alive in World War II. It's what kept a lot of people alive in World War I, right? When a French person and an English person can look at each other without pointing a gun at each other, it means everything, guys, right? So if you are from a cosmopolitan city, you work in an MNC where you have colleagues from different countries, have you taken the time to get to know different cultures? And I think it's the people on the ground that can keep things from going stupid, insane, right? When the guns start coming out, right? So I'm just saying that if you look at the hotspot, and I didn't even do every country. If I do every country, I'll scare the bejesus out of you guys, right? And the thing is, and this is how easy it is. This is how easy it is for us to keep that thing going. So that means create things. Remember, we talked about third places. Are there places where we can go and cook food together, make friends, get to know each other, understand that this person of a different religion isn't trying to kill you, right? Is this purposeful or not purposeful? I also don't know, right? Does it really cost you $1 million to do this, or just a Sunday afternoon? And the willingness to just call out to a few people and get some shit going, right? And the last one is assisting with displacements. And this is a very big one, right? So displacements can happen from anything, be it a war. Sometimes the war zone means the person cannot stay there already. Guys, this is history books, yeah? So look at Song Dynasty, look at Western Roman Empire. This happened. And I have no faith that it won't happen in our time, okay? I'm pretty 99% sure it will happen in our time. There are refugees who have got nowhere to go already. Everyone clear? So that means, and there's also climate disasters, and and you don't be so sure it's not you, right? Don't be so sure that it is not you who has to move house. So the thing is, right now we are all intelligent and we've got international friendships. We've got internet still, and a lot of places are still open. Can we start discussing about what might happen, right? So do we need floating houses? Maybe. do we need to maybe think about how large groups of people can maybe go to the tundra and like figure out how we can go to Siberia and start farming? Maybe this is a bit of a far out thing. Maybe some of you think you don't have the wherewithal or the skills, but sometimes I tell you, you'd be surprised what can happen with an email to an organization that you can find and volunteer your time. Volunteer, like, oh, do you guys need engineers? Okay, I know a few engineers, I can connect you. That's how you participate, guys. That's how you get involved. It doesn't need you to spend money sometimes. Okay, and let's talk about displacements. And this picture, this is one of my last few slides, yeah? Now, this picture is from Bangkok. And just not very long ago, in fact, this happens more often than we like to admit, that Bangkok can get flooded until it looks like this. Jakarta looks like this nowadays sometimes, right? And so I actually found a whole list of cities. And guys, this is not even an exhaustive list. I just found the ones that I think you might recognize the names, because if I put all the weird names, you won't recognize it, right? But look at the list that's here. You got Bangkok on the list. Venice is there. Jakarta is sinking already. That's why they're moving their capital, right? Amsterdam is sinking. Look, guys, Tokyo is on the list. You know how many people are in Tokyo? And New York, Shanghai, Calcutta. Look at that. Osaka, Guangzhou, Alexandria in Egypt. And there's a lot of history there that's going to go underwater, right? So the thing is, it's like, let's add up just this list alone. Let's add up how many million people are we talking about here? How many million? Billion maybe. I don't know, right? And so the thing is, right now, I'm talking to an audience that is among the most educated people in the world. And that means if you're scared that you don't have a job, oh, I got a job here for you. Doesn't pay a 13-month bonus, but it's one way to be really purposeful. It doesn't actually require you to quit your job. I repeat, it doesn't require you to quit your job, but it means that you kind of have to raise your hand and step up, maybe make a few friends, and maybe be a lot less lonely, and to actually spend your weekends doing something a bit more useful than watching Netflix, So, and with that, that's what I have for you guys. And at the end of the day, I'm just quoting DPM Wong here when he says that the Singapore dream is no longer just the 5 Cs. And I think it's a bit strange if we start thinking about making plans in 2024. It's October, it's November, you're planning for next year. I'm not sure if you're planning to upgrade your condo, but maybe if you have 5 minutes to maybe consider using the extra resources, maybe the Amsterdam guy might be able to use your 10K for something that might save the whole city of Amsterdam. Just think about it, But if you're thinking about leading purposeful lives, it's really about, the word is allocation. It's not donation and it's not charity. It's reallocation of resources, because we can leave it all in the bank and have it burn, so that can happen too, right? So I'd like to leave you with one last quote, is that the real problem, and people are so concerned about AI and whether they will take over your job, the real problem is not whether the machine is thinking, but whether the men are thinking. So when humans stop thinking and you expect the AI to think for you, then don't complain. So and I don't think I brought anything in yesterday and today that doesn't make sense on a human level. Okay, so I conclude my presentation this time around for my global astrology forecast for 2024 and 25. And I think for so many people who have been following me for a while, when I say that there's a difference between like a trash internet astrologer and a really skilled astrologer, I think I've worked very, very hard to show the difference between them. And one of the ways in which this can be very useful is looking at things like birth charts. So that means when you get started on a journey in astrology, you don't go and do like prediction from the start, okay? Guys, I've done this 20 years, yeah? So the thing is, it takes some time to really get to the prediction part, and trust me, it's not fun, right? But the thing is, let's start from a very simple stage where people can learn to interpret your own chart. And that means even as we talk about this reallocation of resources, not your money, but your time and your effort. So if you are going to consider maybe doing something different from what you've done in the past, that may not be relevant to your education or your university degree also, that you might want to look at what groups of people you might be able to impact. In what way might you be able to contribute? And a lot of things are not so clear. Like, for example, the fact that I can talk for 6 hours and keep your attention is not something I learned at university. It's me. This is me as a person. So what is it about you that can maybe make some kind of contribution in your own unique way? And in a way that is on your terms. No one asked you to do it. You did it because you thought this is your way of participating. It's your way of making sure that you spend your time that is actually actively and possibly effectively, if we all do it together, we can maybe make this transition a little bit less painful for everybody, okay? So my guys are going to be posting a link here. Let me see if I got a QR code. Yes, I do. Okay, so I got a QR code here, and we've got classes going in December, January, and you don't have to worry if you're a beginner. I am very experienced at teaching beginners, and we always start with your own birth chart first to look for patterns and possibly to identify, like I said, what are some of the skills that you can use. I'm most definitely in one of the air era industries of redefining work. Okay, and if I may say so, astrology has always been huge in all the air eras. It's not just that if I say so, but I was surprised to see that astrology is one of the main professions. Go and look at the Mayans, they've got astronomy everywhere. So it's like the proof is still standing in world. And there must be a reason why, and I joke with my marketers that it is in times of crisis that people go to astrology. And it's like, maybe that doesn't sell astrology very well, but I think if you are coming from where I see it, that it's like when you're ready to look at problems and say, let's find solutions, I'd like to pitch here and tell you that astrology can be a very good way of making sure that people are rational, looking at facts and data and information that you can apply into real life. Okay, so if you'd like to get in touch with us, you can either do that, or let me see if there's an email address. Okay, there isn't, but my guys are going to post email address hello@selfastrology.com if you'd like to find out more about the stuff that we are doing. And a lot of it is we're trying our very best to sort of move as many people as possible into an air era mindset. Okay, so if you'd like to get in touch with us, December and January is a really good time to do this class. Instead of going for a holiday, maybe start thinking about how you might want to get yourself be more purposeful in the years to come. Okay, so thanks guys. It's been 6.5 hours of my presentation. So please do us a favor. My team has worked incredibly hard on this, as have I. So I would like to joke and say, if I charge all of you $1 for every hour that I spend on my prediction webinar, I'll be a multi-millionaire by now. But the thing is, do let more people know about what we are doing, and that's the best way that you can do this for us. You can let more people know about the replays. We're probably going to be putting replays up. When it does come up, we'll let you know. Please tell as many people as possible. And it's only when there's enough people listening and understanding what this is going on that maybe we might be able to move these things and to avoid the errors that people from past Earth eras made when they move from Earth to air era. Okay, so thank you for that. And guys, thank you, and please let your friends know. Okay, see you guys. Bye-bye.